This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Good morning. It's 3 minutes after 10. Who's this bloke covering for Suella Braverman, asks Richard. Well, thank you to Lewis Goodall for doing such a sterling job while I was indisposed. I was doing jury service, and would you believe, I thought I'd be coming back overflowing with content and insights without obviously committing any contempts of court by revealing any of the machinations that unfolded in the actual jury room. But I managed not to get selected. I managed to sit in the canteen for 8 full days. I got selected on the second day, late on the second day, and then I got discharged early on the third day, along with the rest of the jury, for logistical reasons. And then I spent the rest of that week and half of this week sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I've read a lot of books. You can expect a couple of recommendations about soon-to-be-released historical fiction in the next few weeks. But I haven't really learned much about the justice system, except that they do a really, really good job in really difficult circumstances. The court officers, it's a really difficult job, and they very, very easy to criticise, isn't it? But when you see people working really hard to keep wheels turning and to keep them turning smoothly, you get reminded of, not for the first time actually, of how important government is, or civil service rather. Which brings us, of course, to Donald Trump, who is embarked at the moment, or at least his co-president, Elon Musk, is embarked upon a project to dismantle all of these systems that essentially keep civilization on rails. And we will no doubt look into some elements of that a little later in the programme, or a little later in the week, because we begin with the biggest story of the morning internationally, which is the reports regarding Donald Trump's conversation with Vladimir Putin. And if your brain works in a way that is anything like mine, you will find a headline including Trump and Putin start talks to end the war in Ukraine. Trump says he has opened talks with Putin to end war in Ukraine. And are you thinking what I'm thinking yet? Trump's shock call with Putin to end the war, but will peace deal betray Ukraine? There's the Daily Mail actually getting it a little closer to what I suspect is troubling you than the other two headlines managed. Because how can a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine be negotiated between Russia and the United States of America? Well, in a way, the answer is quite straightforward. The United States of America is the world leader in this sort of context, a position it has achieved as a consequence of decades of leadership, by dint of its involvement in world affairs, both military and financial, and, of course, due to economies of scale, the fact that it carries more heft than any other country in recent history, means that it becomes a de facto leader of the free world when it chooses to be so. What I find fascinating about what Donald Trump is currently up to, and you'll allow me to say this on my first day back from a longish break, what much of the British media seems to be very slow to notice, is that Donald Trump doesn't want to be the leader of the free world in terms of responsibility. He doesn't want to provide moral, financial, or military leadership. If you're wondering what I mean by moral, just think about what the word sovereignty means. So, Vladimir Putin invades sovereign territory of Ukraine, and the world order that respects the rule of law or that respects territorial integrity, balks at the very prospect. But Trump's only been in the White House for 3 weeks, and he's already insulted the sovereignty of Canada, the sovereignty of Greenland, Denmark, and he's barely started. He's barely drawn breath. He doesn't care. He has an attitude to international relations that's a lot closer to Vladimir Putin's than it is to anybody else who's ever inhabited the White House. But he still wants to be the leader. So if you withdraw support for Ukraine, you cease to be, in any way, qualified to comment on what should happen to Ukraine. And the word that has really surprised me this morning by popping up so frequently in my head as I read around the story and refreshed my memory of some of the elements and some of the new developments, the word I've got, and the word that I think will form the basis of our phone-in today, is appeasement. By coincidence, there's a story in the newspaper today about a letter Neville Chamberlain wrote in 1940, just days after quitting as Prime Minister, in which he conceded that he was quite relieved to no longer be in the job. That appeasement policy towards Nazi Germany, the idea that a promise from Adolf Hitler that he would stop his imperial ambitions, having invaded Poland, would somehow be binding, has of course become a byword for prime ministerial incompetence. And the minute you start thinking about Neville Chamberlain, you start thinking about Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill, the European leader who saw the threat of Nazism long before anybody else did. Daily Mail was still writing editorials about what a top chap Adolf Hitler was and why Oswald Mosley would make a brilliant prime minister when Winston Churchill was warning about what Adolf Hitler's rise would do. Once again, I find myself heartbroken at the failure of people in my industry to be ignorant of even the most basic history of our own islands. People talking up Trump at the moment, utterly ignorant of the fact that their 1930s equivalents were talking up Hitler and Oswald Mosley. But it's not Trump that we're comparing to Hitler today. It's Vladimir Putin, who invades sovereign countries and banks on apathy, ambivalence or incompetence from other Western leaders. That's how it works. It worked in 2012 or 14, forgive me. I said I'd been reading up on stuff, but my mind does occasionally go blank. When he went into Crimea, he banked on a swift resolution and apathy from the White House, apathy from Downing Street, a lack of appetite for getting stuck in and resisting these abuses of sovereignty. And what you have happening now is essentially Vladimir Putin having done to Ukraine what Hitler did to Sudetenland, what he did to Poland in 1939, getting a phone call from the White House about, hey, maybe we could come to some sort of arrangement. Maybe we could come to some sort of peace deal without including Poland in the conversation or indeed Sudetenland. Maybe you're not going to be able to go back to the borders that were there before this illegal invasion took place. And I don't know whether it's because I've had a few days off or whether it's because, once again, I'm going bonkers. But I can't quite believe that people don't see it as clearly as that. Imagine if, and I don't know how good your history is, imagine if FDR had phoned Hitler in 1939 to discuss a possible peace deal after the invasion of Poland. How would that have been reported in the UK media? Probably in some corners of the UK media, like it's being reported today. The idea that Trump has opened the door to a possible peace deal. FDR opens the door to a possible peace deal. But where does that leave the Polish people? Where does that leave Ukrainians? And the other element of this conversation, of course, is the question of what happens next. I always, when I come back from a few days off, have too much in my head. I start thinking about one thing, I've told you this before, and it just starts flying off. So we've already brought FDR into it, we brought appeasement into it, we brought Neville Chamberlain into it. I'm also reminded of the way in which Estonia a few years ago started introducing media literacy education to its schools with a sense of urgency, because the misinformation that can lead to riots on the streets of countries is now so much a part of public discourse that Estonia took the view it needed to start teaching children what Russian propaganda looked like. Otherwise, they could end up believing things that are simply not true. And that swings me back, would you believe, to the jury service that I've just done, or rather not done, and the fact that I found myself sitting at a canteen table, listening to a conversation at the next table, where a middle-class, middle-aged woman of apparently completely respectable demeanour started trying to tell all of her lunch companions that Volodymyr Zelensky had spent all the money that has been sent to Ukraine to fund their army on luxury yachts. She later moved on to an explanation of how she knew that Michelle Obama was actually a man. But that, of course, is why the Estonian government took the view some time ago that it has to start teaching children how to deal with propaganda, how to deal with fake news, how to deal with misinformation. So, looking at the world today, thinking about this intervention from Donald Trump, a US president who cares not a jot for sovereignty and who doesn't want to be a leader in any meaningful sense. He doesn't want to take the lead financially, morally, militarily. That's not even necessarily a criticism. It's certainly not an opinion. It's just counting. He doesn't want to send dollars that he could be dishing up to his mates to Ukraine to resist Russian imperial ambitions. He doesn't want to provide moral leadership because he doesn't believe in sovereignty, particularly as he's proved with his comments about Greenland and Canada. And he doesn't want to provide military leadership because he doesn't want America to be involved in foreign wars, as he has said repeatedly, largely for the same reason that he doesn't want to spend American dollars on foreign wars. So America's role as the protector of what we, I think, still accurately describe as the free world, America's role as the leader and the chief protector, the protector in chief of the free world, has never, to me, looked more fragile. And that is why I wonder whether it is time to use the word appeasement, whether what Donald Trump is doing, and you know that his new director of national intelligence is a Vladimir Putin fangirl. That's not even an exaggeration. She was also very warm towards Bashar al-Assad when he was gassing his own people in Syria. And he's made this woman, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence. Even Mitch McConnell voted against it. And guess what the ratio was? Guess what the vote was that got it over the line? A Vladimir Putin fangirl being put in charge of US intelligence. Yep, you got it. 52-48. There it is again, the infernal ratio. So you've got this situation where everything we've held to be true since pretty much the turn of the 20th century, certainly since the end of the First World War, and absolutely since the middle of the Second, everything that we have held to be true with regard to America's role on the world stage and the primacy of territorial integrity, the importance of sovereignty and borders, seems to me to be under threat. Appeasement? Capitulation, Duncan suggests, or nothing of the sort. 0345 6060 973. And having just told you stuff you probably already knew about the new intelligence director and her admiration for Assad and Putin and others, she actually makes the defense secretary the second maddest appointment in Donald Trump's senior team. And we may have a look at some of his contributions to public discourse in the course of this hour as well. It's 10:16. It's good to be back. I have some breaking news for you. Several people, we learn, have been injured in Munich in Germany after a car drove into a group of people. We'll bring you more detail on this incident as it comes in. As it stands, that's all I know. The question here is, does this look like appeasement to you, or of people who think so taken leave of their senses? Hit the numbers now. You know the rest.
James O'Brien on LBC.
19 is the time, and a bit like the kid in The Sixth Sense. I sometimes worry I see historical echoes everywhere in the way that the kid sees dead people. But you know that these are valid questions, and one that pops up as a consequence of what we've just discussed is the question of where's Churchill? Do you know what Boris Johnson said about Churchill? I thought this was so revealing of Boris Johnson's mentality, psychology, personality. He described Boris Johnson of having bet his shirt on a horse called anti-Nazism and how it came off in spectacular fashion. Incapable of seeing the world in anything other than self-interested and transactional terms. Hey, maybe I'm glorifying Churchill unnecessarily, but I would like to believe that Churchill's opposition to Hitler very early was born of knowledge and understanding of what Hitler represented. So where is the Western leader? If Donald Trump is going to tickle Putin's toes and appoint Putin apologists to senior intelligence, the most senior intelligence positions, where does Churchill come from in the context of Ukraine, in the context of Russia, in the context of Vladimir Putin? I do not know. Phone lines are open. Let's start in Glasgow. Ron is there. Ron, what would you like to say?
Hello, good morning, James.
Hey,
well, you know, I'm an ex-American veteran, and I was in Vietnam and Thailand during the war. And I've lived in this country 50 years. I met my wife in Saudi, and I love this country very, very much. And I've also loved America. But I tell you, today I don't know how to describe it. I'm 78 years old, and I have to say, crushed is maybe the right word. I think all I can say and pray is that Europe wakes up to the fact that the big news today, or yesterday, wasn't that they turned their back on Ukraine. I mean, but they did. They actually gave in territory to Russia openly, straight away.
Yes.
The big news is that America has said, unless I've misunderstood it, maybe I didn't understand what's been said, but I think they've really said, Europe, you better defend Europe yourself because you can't count on us.
Yes, I think that's how I've read it as well. We could both be wrong, but that's why I'm talking about Churchill, actually, which is not something I do every day. But that the leadership didn't come from the other side of the Atlantic when Hitler was invading sovereign territories. It didn't really kick in until after Pearl Harbor. You'll know more about this than I do, but the leadership came from Europe, came from within Europe, and it came from London, and it's not going to do that this time. So where is it going to come from?
Well, you're absolutely right, and I think now, although I'm just not clever enough, but I think we need to think out of the box because the world, as we've known it, has changed. It changed yesterday. Well, maybe we should have seen the signs have been here for several weeks.
Well, but you don't wonder. Maybe we did. We did see the signs, but it didn't crystallise necessarily. In a way, I'm dismayed and relieved to listen to you. Relieved because it means if I am going mad, I'm not on my own. But dismayed, of course, because if we're right, if our fears are correct, then we are looking at a complete upending of the post-war settlement.
Well, you're absolutely right. You're right to say that. And let me tell you what my hope is, because in the midst of this genuine crisis, we have to look for some hope. And the hope is I'm an American. I'm not an untypical American, you know?
Yes.
And I think there must be an awful lot of Americans, I pray there is anyway, thinking the same way I do. And I'm waiting for them to rise and put a stop to this. But is it going to happen? I don't think so. But that's a sliver of hope maybe that I have. But I go back to my original comment, and that is I don't think Europe can count on the support of America. And we are in dangerous grounds here. And I think the talk of, for example, a 5%. I can't remember what they call it, GBP or whatever it is, on defense spending is no longer ridiculous. I think we should be spending that and more, and to prepare ourselves because, you know, for example, there was talk about Russia interfering with our lines on the internet, undersea cables, and that stuff's going to really pick up now. I mean, It is. I suppose, a message of ambivalence.
I mean, Hesketh, the defense secretary, the Fox News presenter turned defense secretary, has described the US, just to clarify what Ron's referring to, as no longer being primarily focused on European security, and that Europe would have to take the lead in defending Ukraine. So, I mean, you talk about untypical and typical Americans. This will play out at home very positively for some people. They don't want to. I mean, you haven't had American troops being sent back in body bags, as was the case in the military engagements you were involved in, Ron. But there is a sense in America of pulling up the drawbridge. There was in the 1940s, as you know. Lindbergh and people like that felt that America had no business whatsoever getting involved in European matters, and we seem to be returning to that kind of territory very, very quickly.
But what we do is going to be the next. What we need is a strong leader now, fast. And it would be wonderful if it was the UK, because I think we need to get our European partners together and decide what we're going to do. And I don't have the answer. I wish to goodness I did.
I don't think anybody does, Ron. But you've provided us with some really helpful and interesting insights, and of course your own service and your own commitment to both countries, your adopted home and your original home, puts you in a special position to comment on this. And that idea of where leadership comes from, and if you were to be really conspiratorial about it, and you were to look at where propaganda has directed its energies in recent years, how somebody sitting in a court canteen in Hounslow can be convinced that Volodymyr Zelensky has been pocketing millions of dollars and spending it all on yachts as a direct consequence of what's happening on the internet, you have to remember how people like Angela Merkel have been treated. And you have to remember how the European Union has been successfully maligned in the English-speaking world. To whose benefit was that, do you think, looking at the world today? Hazel is in Angus in Scotland. Hazel, staying in Scotland. I like it. Hazel, what would you like to say?
Well, I'd love to continue your conversation, but I actually called with my reaction to your use of the word appeasement.
Yes.
Because I think that's really too kind, James.
Gosh.
I don't think Trump is in the least interested in appeasing. He just wants to get rid of a situation, and he thinks if he does that, he will look like this great leader. He doesn't care about Ukraine. He never has. Probably doesn't even know where it is. And so I think you're sort of being over generous with the word.
Because if
but for him, it's not terribly enough.
No, well, I get, because it involves an actual intellectual thought process, which you think is absent in this case. It's a sort of atavistic self-interest, and he's thinking, well, I'll tell Putin, I'll ask Putin what we need to do in order to get him to stop, what he'll accept. We'll tell Ukraine we're not going to support them anymore. It will be a complete capitulation to Putin, but Ukraine can't fight on without my help, so I'll present it as a peace deal, and credulous fools on both sides of the Atlantic will report it as such, in much the same way as they've done with his interventions in the Middle East.
Everyone says he's looking for the Nobel Peace Prize. He keeps saying, I'm going to stop World War III. Well, I don't know about you, but the way he's behaving at the moment, both with Ukraine and with Israel, this total support for Israel,
yes,
he's going to start World War III.
I don't know about that. I don't know who'd be on the other side, to be honest with you, if he's given a sort of free pass to by far the most powerful forces in both cases. I don't know what proper resistance would look like, which leads us back to the question of who leads now. So if you've got this guy Hesketh, whose backstory is absolutely riveting, by the way. I don't know how much of it you're aware of, but I'll share some details with you shortly. You've got the Secretary of State for Defense, the Defense Secretary, telling his country's closest allies that essentially, you're on your own now, guys. The US is no longer, quotes, primarily focused, end quotes, on European security. That is what I mean by the post-war settlement. That is the reality. Pretty much since the bombing of Pearl Harbor, the reality has been that America takes moral, military, and financial leadership of what we still refer to as the free world. And if you're wondering what the unfree world is, well, here's Vladimir Putin to show you. And Donald Trump's appointment, and I don't know how much he acts in conjunction with what he's been told to say by his boss, or whether they go, I don't even know. But Europe now has to provide the overwhelming share of future military aid to Kyiv. And the historical context is impossible to exaggerate. How many people opining on these subjects fully understand what the Bay of Pigs was? How many people know what the Cold War was? How many people could give you a quick countdown on what Khrushchev would have done had he not been held in check by Kennedy and other American presidents? I'm not claiming knowledge on this. My knowledge is cursory at worst. But I've got some. People sitting here talking about how, so many people are getting their knickers in a twist about Donald Trump are displaying historical ignorance on a scale that is treacherous. Actually treacherous. You do not understand the role that America has played in Europe since the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Then you do not understand your own country. You do not understand the importance of sovereignty. You do not understand, you don't know what patriotism is. Well, if America derelicts this historical duty or concludes that it is no longer a duty, everything is up for grabs. And the biggest grabber of all is sitting in the Kremlin with his trotters up, twirling his moustaches. God, there's some mixed metaphors for you. Here's Thomas Watts with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:33. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I just said, contemplating the deployment of the word appeasement to describe Donald Trump, who has, of course, appointed a massive Vladimir Putin fan as the Director of National Security and a man accused of all manner of misdemeanors, both sexual, financial, and habitual as Secretary of State for Defense. Is it time to use the word appeasement? Mark unintentionally provides a helpful illustration of what appeasement looks like from this side of the Atlantic. Here you go. So we have a raging war for 4 years under Biden, costing billions of dollars and thousands of lives. Donald Trump, of course, claimed it was 1.5 million lives, which is just around about 10 times more than in reality. But hey, everybody trust him. As expected, writes Mark, Trump returns to power, and as per his previous presidency, peace is being restored to the world. I think I've got Afghanistan online too there, Mark. The Liberals seem to really love war, violence and money wasting. So, to take it back to 1939, Hitler has invaded Poland. Neville Chamberlain has suggested that we should just let him keep it, and as long as he promises not to do anything else, then we can stop all of the raging wars and stop spending billions of pounds and sacrificing thousands of lives, and we can restore peace to the world because, why shouldn't Hitler keep Poland? The Liberals seem to really love war, violence and money wasting, Mark would have written in 1939. Or is that not fair? Is this nothing like appeasement? Is this not a time to reflect upon the end of the post-war settlement? And by that, I simply mean that America's leadership of the free world. I know moral is a bit of a push. And certainly some of the actions of the CIA, particularly in Central and South America, mean that any crown is heavily tarnished. But remember, it's better than all of the available alternatives. I've got my first entry for Idiot's Corner as well. It's nice to be back. Thank you to Rolf for this. Dear James, don't forget. See, the problem with this one is I never know whether it's someone who is applying for a spot in Idiot's Corner or whether it's someone doing a parody of someone applying for a spot in Idiot's Corner. I've got no way of knowing. I suppose I could click on your history and see what other messages you've sent me over the last few weeks. But anyway, here's the message. Dear James, don't forget that Adolf Hitler was a socialist. Idiot's Corner or someone taking the mickey out of people in Idiot's Corner? I'll let you decide. 10:35 is the time. Margaret is in Auchenbury. Margaret, what would you like to say?
James, this is a very interesting conversation we're having, and
I hope so, Margaret. My kids need shoes.
I think I fully agree with the word appeasement. It's probably most aptly describing what is happening in this world now. But I think what I wanted to say is I feel it is. I'm originally from Poland, and in my mind, Britain has been always a moral leader in the most precarious moments in our history in our modern state. Yes.
I'm just going to try and improve. I'm going to try and get you back on a better phone line, Margaret, because what you say is important. And again, sometimes when I'm off for a few days, I wonder whether I've exaggerated in my mind the calibre of calls that come into this programme. But we start with a Vietnam veteran talking about his horror at what has happened to America's role on the world stage, and now we have someone of Polish extraction talking about how the use of the word appeasement is accurate, and you realise that it's all about perspectives, different perspectives. Lisa's in Southampton. Lisa, what would you like to say?
I'm a daughter of a World War II veteran, U.S. Army, and also I'm a mother-in-law of a Lithuanian citizen.
Okay.
And
right.
and also I'm a Democrat. But when I come back to that, Mark, both of those presidencies, FDR and Woodrow Wilson, were both Democrats, and they refused to go in.
Yes.
And so I think that has to be looked at. In fact, the party that is probably least warmongering is the Democrats. The Republicans have always been much more keen on the military and fighting wars than the Democrats have. And I am very worried about Lithuania because obviously my son, his family's there now, and we've been there several times, and they are very, very ready. They are prepared.
I think this is underreported over here, and it's why, for people who don't know, it's why I mentioned Estonia and the urgency with which they introduced media literacy education a few years ago after an entirely misinformation-driven protest, violent rampage unfolded on the streets of Estonia. So just give us a quick idiot's guide. I'm the idiot, Lisa, for the avoidance of doubt.
Let me say one thing. My daughter-in-law's mother-in-law stood with 2 million people at the end of the Cold War, and they could have been shot, and they formed a human chain from Lithuania all the way up to Estonia to oppose the USSR. That's the strength of feeling you have in the Baltic states. They are prepared to die. They are prepared to lay it all on the line because they know what it's like to live under communism. And Americans have never, ever experienced that.
Well, some people, of course, still argue that they experienced it under Joe Biden, Lisa. But we'll leave them out of the conversation for now. And how are you? I mean, it's fascinating that you provided us with those sort of 3 or 4 biographical details of your own, because you, like my first caller today, like Ron, are looking at the role that your country has played in my country, changing at incredible speed in real time. I think.
Well, I mean, the thing that frightens me most is the attitude change in America. And I liked your caller, the veteran in Vietnam, because I'm only about 10 years younger than him, so I do remember Vietnam. And I just think that the politicians under Trump, they don't have the expertise that Anthony Blinken had. And I think they just want to get out because it will show the world that they actually don't have the expertise to deal with this on a diplomatic footing. So that's what, he's like a bull in a china shop. And this is what frightens me more than anything else, is not slowly, is just go in as a wrecking ball. And
getting a headline on a Monday that may have become redundant by a Wednesday, but you've already stuck it in the bank on Tuesday.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. And the comments from Hesketh about Europe no longer being a priority, that brings your links to Lithuania back into the picture, doesn't it?
It does, because the thing is that, we all realize that Hesketh is probably of the mind that we should pull out of NATO. I mean, Trump tried to do that during the first presidency. I don't trust Hesketh. I mean, the appointees that he's had for the cabinet, I've watched all the Senate hearings. I am appalled at the lack of expertise.
And historical knowledge, not just diplomatic expertise, but I mean, it's come to something where Mitch McConnell is the only Republican standing up against the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard to National Security Advisor.
Well, and it's amazing that two ex-Democrats, Gabbard and Kennedy, are actually up for two extremely high positions. I guess he will be appointed today, because I can't see him not getting through. And that's what's amazing to me, is they will take anybody.
Yes, there's various theories on why, but the more sort of mad and chaotic senior appointments are, the more power is accrued by Donald Trump and, of course, by association, Elon Musk. Lisa, thank you. The Lithuanian angle is fascinating, because this is sending a message to historical allies, a message coming straight out of the White House that we're not really your ally anymore, or we're certainly not prioritizing protecting you from the imperial ambitions of a murderous dictator in the Kremlin. Let's not make any bones about that. A murderous dictator who, of course, Nigel Farage has repeatedly described as the politician he admires most, I think. 10:41 is the time. Thank you, Lisa. So I just clarifying on the history, you're looking more, I guess, at the 1938 settlement, the Munich Agreement after Czechoslovakia, perhaps than Poland. But the idea that the American president would get on the phone to Hitler after an invasion and say, hey, can we come to some sort of settlement here? That would have been called appeasement. And what are we going to call it in 2025? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Neil's in Camberley. Neil, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello,
over the past almost 3 years, we've had Ukrainians stay with us under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. So we obviously get a lot of inside knowledge as to what's going on. And from their perspective this morning, with the news that's going on, they definitely see it as appeasement. And in fact, I do as well. I don't think I'm wrong in saying that a few months ago, when talking about the level of defence spending by NATO countries, I think Trump actually turned around and said, well, if Putin happens to invade a NATO country, then that's their fault for not keeping their spending up.
Yeah.
And that is the concern, that he'll just sort of sit back on his heels for 2 or 3 years, or even until Trump potentially leaves the White House, if he does decide to leave the White House, and start all over again. But he'll see this so-called appeasement, and he may well go, as your previous caller said, up to the Baltic states.
History suggests that not only people like him, but him specifically. He does not stop. He gets away with Crimea. He moves into Ukraine. He gets away with Ukraine. He moves into Baltic states, Estonia.
Yeah, no one knows what his grand plan is for his legacy, but I suspect taking the entire Ukrainian country as a whole and possibly more is on his little spreadsheet that he has on his table.
Where do you think Trump's motive? I mean, one hesitates to attribute any sort of logical process to him, as opposed to the sort of atavistic self-interest, the feeding of appetites. My friend Edward Docks wrote a superb article essentially talking about ogres, and we try and analyze ogres. You can't analyze ogres. They just want food and sex and power and all of that. There's no intellectual process in place. But we have to try sometimes. What is motivating Trump? Is he simply on Vladimir Putin's strings? Is he on the end of Vladimir Putin's strings? Does he truly resent the idea of money going to a country that he probably can't spell when it could be going to him and his mates instead? Where do we think this abandonment of America's historical role is coming from?
I honestly don't know. I don't think we can predict Trump at all. One minute he says one thing and the next he says another. So it may well be that when he sits in front of Putin, he comes out with something completely different. And no one knows. But from the Ukrainian angle, my guests are frightened.
Is this one of the worst days of the 3 years?
It's in the top five.
In the context of politics, as opposed to military engagements.
Yes, in the context of politics, I would say it's probably in the top two. And Trump's saying that there must be elections. Of course, there must be elections in Ukraine. Yeah. But Putin will see this weakness as a means to probably interfere with these elections and install someone who is definitely on Putin's side. And what can the free world do about that?
And that is one of the suggestions that's come in while we were talking about what Trump's motivations may be, and one caller suggesting it's payback for previous interference in previous elections, which I don't think is certainly something that you could stand up in court, but it's a view. Thank you, Neil. And the numbers are really relevant here, because there might be a danger of thinking we're exaggerating the importance of the US in this context. They've currently spent about £74 billion on supporting Ukraine. Okay, that's military, humanitarian and financial. They're good words, actually. When I was talking about leadership, I don't need moral. We could go for humanitarian. The United States of America has historically provided military, humanitarian and financial support to the free world. And Donald Trump doesn't want to do that anymore. He doesn't like spending money unless there's something in it for him. So Germany comes second at 13 billion, and we come third at just over 12. Japan is in there at nearly 8 billion. Canada, nearly 7. So that gulf is huge. The top donor, £73.75 billion. The second top donor, Germany, £13.1 billion. And the Second World War parallels that we've been drawing, I don't know whether you derive hope from this, but the idea that Germany, the UK, Japan and Canada are the next four countries after the US. And listen, if we need a new world order, we need a new world order. No one, I don't think 5 years ago, well, maybe 5 years ago they would have done, but 10 years ago, no one would have credited the idea that it would be necessitated by America abandoning its role, undertaking an epic international dereliction of duty, surrendering leadership. No one would have thought that was ever going to happen. But whatever the causes of it are, then these other countries, Germany, UK, Japan, Canada, Denmark, Netherlands, Sweden, France, Poland, and all the rest, need to perhaps start imagining a world without any American leadership. And if you think about who the American leader is at the moment, the fears of Ukrainians here as refugees, the fears of Ukrainians in Ukraine, the fears of people in the Baltic states, notwithstanding, and those fears are real and urgent. In the great sweep of history, if someone like Donald Trump can become president of the United States of America, then maybe countries that remain a little closer to sanity do need to start imagining a world in which America doesn't automatically assume the mantle of leadership at times like these. That's a pretty desperate reach for a silver lining, isn't it? 10:48 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
51 is the time. Staying on matters European, but of a rather more urgent nature. I mentioned to you earlier that a major police operation is underway in Munich after a car was driven into pedestrians in the South German city. Kate Brady is a Washington Post reporter in Berlin, and she joins us now. Kate, what do we know?
We're still waiting at the moment for a lot of the concrete details, but as you said, we know that earlier this morning, just over an hour ago, about 10:30 local time, in Munich. A car we've seen from photos from the scene that was a Mini Cooper seemed to have driven into a group of people. We know so far that several people have been injured. Police haven't yet been able to confirm to me exactly how many. There are local media reports of somewhere between 15 and 20 people that have been injured, and we know that at the time around that square where this incident happened, several people were striking. There was a union strike happening, but how this occurred, what the motive was, whether this was an accident, we still don't know.
Has the driver been secured?
Yes, the driver was arrested shortly afterwards, and police have said as far as I'm aware, he poses no further danger to the public, and the police have also called on the public right now to refrain from any speculation.
Good luck with that. Kate Brady, thank you. Washington Post reporter in Berlin, bringing you up to date with all of the available information surrounding this surrounding this incident of a car being driven into a group of people who, as Kate told us, would have contained or certainly seemed to have been part of some sort of picket line. Approximately 20 people injured, Munich Fire Brigade has said, some critically. 10:52 is the time. One of my favourite foreign correspondents, I should have checked up a little earlier on what he had to say, Ian Birrell, has written this morning, so depressing, so grotesque, so humiliating to watch the West's betrayal of Ukraine, the shafting of democracy and the abject appeasement of Russia's war criminals yet again. And there it is. You just wait for Donald Trump to get into the White House, and the abject appeasement of Russia's war criminals is underway yet again. And listen, it doesn't make him infallible, but Ian is one of the people who risk their lives to report on what happens in war zones. That's why I had to bite my tongue on Tuesday, listening to a woman in the canteen at the courts where I was doing jury service, talking about how Volodymyr Zelensky spends all the money on yachts, and you sort of think, well, you know, I've had the privilege of breaking bread with Alexander Navalny's widow. I count Vladimir Kara-Murza, who Putin's tried to murder on 2 or 3 different occasions. I count him as a personal friend. You know, as well as I do, the work that Bill Browder has done to bring attention to what Vladimir Putin represents, what he is, why he does what he does, and yet somebody living in this country, consuming an unleavened diet of online lies, misinformation and propaganda, can arrive at conclusions that allow them to send messages like the one we read out earlier from Mark. It's tragic. It doesn't come close. Agatha is in Bromley. Agatha, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Firstly, I'm a first-time caller, and I'm very nervous. And I know you keep saying it's just you, and possibly about 1.4
I have to say it, Agatha. I'm contractually required. I am contractually required to say it's only me.
The reason I've picked up the phone today, James, is because I come from Slovakia. And due to personal circumstances and the fact that I am a lone parent in difficult economic situation, I have been thinking of returning to Slovakia for quite a while. Yes. However, the government in Slovakia has changed in September 2023, and it is rather right-wing, pro-Russian government. Recently, there was an announcement, or not an announcement, but a kind of, yesterday, I think Louis mentioned that Slovakia may be one of the possible places where the negotiation might take place between Russia and Ukraine. And as a child, growing up within the communist country, it was drilled into me during the education that the Munich Treaty was about us, without us. And I feel this is exactly what's happening to Ukraine now. It is the announcement about Trump having the conversation with Putin without actually speaking to Zelensky first. It feels like the treaty is being considered without Ukraine's approval, or I don't know.
No, I get it. Permission, whatever word you want to use. For people who don't know, this. I mean, I haven't heard that phrase before. About us and without us. This was the 1938 agreement.
Yes. Yeah, when Sudet Germany has been handed back to Germany, and that was part of Czechoslovakia at the time. So Slovakia was part of Czechoslovakia at the time, and this is what we've been drilled since early, and this is why there was such a anti-West feeling, because you have decided about our lands and our people without us being present, and that is an appeasement, and this is exactly what's happening to Ukraine.
You'd reach for that word immediately.
Yes, because it is. I can't see it any other way. I've called you 3 years ago. I've tried to get on when you asked the question at the beginning of the war whether this might actually be a World War III. And my opinion at the time was yes. Now, 3 years later, and with Trump in the White House, I feel completely differently. It's not going to be the beginning of the World War III. It's free range for everyone. Whoever's got power. Whoever's got military, so Slovakia is a little country, 5.5 million people.
Yes.
It means that if we were to stand up to Putin, which we are not with current government, but if we were to do anything, and although we are part of NATO, if Trump decides to not support NATO or do whatever and break the international agreements and contracts and laws, where would we stand as a country?
Where would resistance come from? So
why people do not understand. I understand why Baltic countries are so worried.
Yeah.
We, as Slovakia, we don't even have a border with Russia. We have a border with Ukraine, with Poland, with Hungary. Hungary is going the same way. It's kind of pro-Putin, right-wing. So I worry for my country. And like I said, I was thinking of returning to Slovakia, and I may need to do so for support that I can get from my family.
Yes.
With regards to economics and emotions and psychological support. But my goodness, am I scared to return to the country thinking that in 3 or 4 years' time, I might need to leave again and go for a safer place, something like UK again.
Or almost become a refugee.
Yep.
I'm sorry to hear that, and I hope you're wrong, but I know that my words are largely meaningless in that context. Just to clarify one thing, if I may, because some people listening will be thinking that your change of mind on the prospect of World War III might be good news. They might be thinking, oh, well, that's good. We don't want World War III. But what you're positing as the alternative is a sort of unresisted Putin doing whatever the hell he wants. Anyway,
and at some point we end up again in a Cold War with countries having nuclear weapons threatening each other. What do you think? World War III. It might not be open World War III. It will be a Cold War of sorts.
Another Cold War. What do you think Trump is driven by in these kind of spaces?
I have no idea. I do not know. I've got my school, my classmates from a high school, living in America, and although they're Slovak, their suggestions and their ideation and their rhetoric is very much Trumpian. So it is. I don't know what drives him, but I can tell you that he's very good at brainwashing people.
Might is right. It's interesting. On one side you've got might is right, and on the other side you've got about us but without us. Two sort of pithy rhymes that speak of the two sides in this kind of discussion. I hope your fears prove to be unfounded, Agatha, and I promise to keep you company while we go through the process of finding out whether they are or not. But that's an incredibly personal perspective on problems that remain, for many of us, more theoretical than practical, at least for now. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I should have explained perhaps why, apart from FDR, which I think you now fully understand why I've been thinking a lot about Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the context of the current inhabitant of the Oval Office, why have I been thinking a lot about the dissolution of the monasteries as well? I'll tell you what, I'll give a special prize to anybody who comes up with the correct answer and manages to text it or WhatsApp it to me before close of play today. But up next, we're going to look at new towns and the plausibility of getting them built.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Some clever listeners, why am I thinking... What sort of a phone-in is this? Why am I thinking a lot about the dissolution of the monasteries at the moment? Jamie's had a go. Is it because Henry VIII ripped up all the existing rules of the world order for his own personal aggrandizement and ambition? That's extremely close. It's not quite on the money. Lots of you have clearly read Wolf Hall, The Mirror and the Light. Richard references that. Quite a few people picking up on similar themes. I've been thinking the same about the 1500s. Sophie's got it. Sophie's absolutely smashed it. This is exactly what I have been thinking. Musk equals Cromwell and Trump equals Henry VIII. Musk will ultimately be the fall guy and lose his head. Right, Sophie. Thomas Cromwell, or I don't know who you're going to go with, but the chief architect of the dissolution of the monasteries. So you have an incredibly, a leader, an absolute leader of boundless greed, instructing somebody to just get him stuff, get me more stuff. And if you think about it in the context of the 21st century, and the still kind of reverence that we regard for religion. The idea that you could turn around and say, why don't we just get all the money that the monks have got, boss? Why don't we get all the money that the monks have got? And you say, well, this is a Christian country. Yeah, but the monks are all corrupt. It's like DEI. It's like pretending that diversity, equity, and inclusion are bad things or are negatives that are behind. Why don't we go after DEI? Why would we do that? Well, because we can get lots of money and pretend that it's somehow for the good of the population. So that is why. Thank you, Sophie. That's top of the class for you. That is exactly why I've been thinking a lot about the dissolution of the monasteries in recent weeks. But I'm not going to try and get a phone in out of that analogy. I think we stretched our historical knowledge far enough in the last hour. We return next to completely contemporaneous conversation. We are looking at the speech that Keir Starmer is yet to give, but is set to give later today, about actual new towns. Now, I can't, because of my age and because of recent years of experience, I can't get... I don't do undiluted excitement anymore about political announcements. But if I did, the idea of 100 areas across England applying to build towns of more than 10,000 people, and Keir Starmer, apparently inspired by the King, saying that he wants them to be built by British workers and he wants construction underway before the end of Parliament. And it will be part of that massive drive for 1.5 million new homes. This would be quite exciting, wouldn't it? This would be a good thing. It's got that sort of post-war feel to it, that you come out and you build back better. And yet, I'm afraid... build back better. There's another B word, isn't there, that we have to bring into the conversation at this point. And the idea of building new towns in a country brought to its knees, particularly in the arena of construction, by that other B word that I'm not going to say yet, just leads me towards a very simple question of plausibility. Up to a dozen new towns will be under construction by the next election after 100 potential locations in England were identified as part of Keir Starmer's promise to deliver the largest house building programme since the post-war era. I don't want to do a poo-poo phone in. I don't want to just invite you to ring in and tell me why this is pie in the sky. But I'm going to find it very hard to find a way into it that is not just inviting you to ring in and tell me why this is pie in the sky. What I'd like to do is involve some older listeners, perhaps, on the question of what's it like when they build a town in a place where there wasn't a town before. Bedford Park, near where I live in Chiswick, was a new town, but quite a long time ago. I think even in the last century, they just decided, London was expanding, and rather than do it willy-nilly, They just built more of a suburb than a town, I suppose. But that idea that you move essentially overnight from fields to town, not as an expansion of a town that was there before, but as an entirely new entity, an entirely new urban entity. What's the one you think of first? I think I know. The one you think of first when I say new towns. You think of Milton Keynes, right? Is that right? I do. Do you, Keith? You think of Milton Keynes? That's what everybody thinks of Milton Keynes. I don't know much about Milton Keynes, apart from apparently the roundabouts are a bit shocking. But what was there before? Was it just fields? Fens? Where is Milton Keynes? Is it in East Anglia? Where is it? Is it what county is it? I don't know. We should do the show from Milton Keynes. So that's what I think of. I live in the southeast, so that possibly explains why I think of Milton Keynes when I hear the word new town. But I don't know. Do you live in a new town? What happened? I mean, how does it work? They just turn up one day, break the ground, and start building a bloody town? When's the last time we built a town? Does anybody know? When is literally the last time we built a new town? And this is not language I'm familiar with. What are you doing today? I'm building a town. Really? Lego? No, real town. What year do you think that was? It was the largest new town ever built in the UK, one of the biggest in Europe. It was designated on January the 20th. What year do you think? January the 23rd, 1967. And it was, as it would be now, designed to relieve housing congestion in London after World War II. So people would move out of London towards Milton Keynes. It's still the fastest growing new town. But I think it is the most recently designated. So in 1946, they introduced the New Towns Act. And 13 years later, the new town of Milton Keynes, the correct word is designated. So I don't know that I'll have people listening. I mean, who would know, really? Because you didn't live there, did you? What a stupid question. What's it like to be living somewhere that then becomes a new town? And the whole point is there'd be maybe a couple of farmers living there. And then, but I don't know. What happens when they build a new town? It's possibly a bridge too far, even for my brilliantly qualified callers. How are we going to do this is the question that I've got for you. Do you remember when I invented... Can you remember what it was called? I said they've abolished freedom of movement, but they'll have to bring it back under another name. Liberty of motion, I called it, didn't I? Do you remember when I invented liberty of motion? Were you listening? I invented liberty of motion because of gravity. I didn't realise that Brexit would see an explosion in immigration under Boris Johnson in the way that it did. But I did know that the idea of shutting down freedom of movement because you don't like foreigners was ridiculous, and it would be highlighted as ridiculous by the way in which we slowly crept back towards acknowledging that we need people to come here to work. But I said they won't be able to call it freedom of movement. They'll have to call it something else. And I suggested they would call it liberty of motion, and that eventually pretty much every job going would be on a special Home Office list of professions and areas of work in which we needed to bring in skilled workers from abroad. Who do you think is on that list today? So the new categories of overseas workers eligible to apply for UK skilled worker visas that have recently emerged. Just for the avoidance of doubt, I am not one of those people who think stories like this are negative. Just highlights how stupid Brexit is, and I have absolutely no problem with people coming here from overseas to work. I know it's a very unfashionable position, but I don't think that by dint of whatever city is on your birth certificate, the quality of your character can be derived. But I told you a few years ago, they'll bring in liberty of motion, or they may not call it that, and it will basically involve admitting that pretty much every sector under the sun is going to need skilled worker visas in order to acknowledge the fact that turning off a tap of labour was an incredibly stupid thing to do. I don't fully understand why we still need to do this now, despite the explosion in immigration since Brexit, but I do know that skilled worker visas are now being offered to yoga teachers, dog walkers and DJs. DJs? Keith's a bit worried. Did you know Keith has a secret life as a disco DJ? So there are not enough disco DJs now. Not enough home. Why don't we train our own, Keith? Why don't we train our own DJs? Wheels of steel, dog walkers, yoga teachers. Look, it's in the Daily Telegraph, so you should probably take it with a pinch of salt. Just like that story they did before I went away about illegal immigrants in London. They've so far published 3 separate apologies about that story. But, of course, if you repeated it on a radio programme or a television programme, you probably don't respect your listeners or your viewers enough to concede that you were actually spouting complete rollicks. So the newspapers that published it are regulated by IPSO. They have had to apologise. The story about 1 in 12 Londoners being an illegal immigrant. Absolute nonsense. But if I had presented it to you as a fact in my column or on my radio show, then if I was morally bankrupt, I wouldn't feel any requirement whatsoever to apologise and redress the balance. But hey-ho, I digress. DJs, yoga teachers, dog walkers. So this is a country that can't find enough DJs, dog walkers and yoga teachers, but is going to find enough plumbers, bricklayers, engineers to build 1.5 million new homes. And that is probably the more obvious phone-in for our purposes together. All right? 0345 6060 973. I want to have postcards from new towns, if I can. Not literally, I want you to ring me, but you'll be like an audio postcard, like Letter from America on Radio 4 with Alistair Burnett, and the brilliant sort of updated version of it that Simon Marks does for us on LBC. But what happens? How much does it transform an area? I've told you in the past about watching a field near where I grew up become a housing estate, and it's quite jarring. It's not a field I would have been able to see from my bedroom window, but it's certainly one that I could have got to in a 5-minute bicycle ride just down Haberley Road, past the fountain, which is flats now, up there, just before the Briars, on the right, field, now houses, for those of you familiar with that particular corner of Kidderminster. And it's crazy. You used to like 3 or 4 houses going up in your area, or 1 house going up in your area. But that's a field full of houses, and that's not a new town. So a new town built from scratch. Question number 1, what's it going to be like? 0345 6060 973. Question number 2, who's going to build it? Who's qualified to contribute to this conversation? How easy is it to get a crew together? Forget about the fact that all of your costs have been increased by Brexit. Bringing anything in from overseas has been increased by Brexit. We've still got a government and an opposition, and God knows how Nigel Farage is still managing to evade responsibility for the catastrophic impact of his life's work, Brexit. We've still got political parties, with the exception of the Lib Dems and the Greens, who are denying, and the SNP, of course, denying the negative impact that it's had on every single aspect of our life. But how are we going to build an entire town where most people can't even find a builder to do them a new kitchen extension? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Alistair Cook, not Alistair Burnett. Nobody's perfect. All right, Alistair Cook did the letter, not the cricketer, the other one did the letter from America, and it is one of my all-time favourite radio items. But I digress. Here's the story. We are building a dozen new towns. Who's going to build them? 0345 6060 973. And I can't get this question right. So Roundhay in Leeds, Letchworth, Welwyn Garden City. There are new towns. I've got the question. What's it like if you're the first generation to live there? How is it? Because you lived somewhere else before. I'm clever like that. You lived somewhere else before. What's it like to move to a new town? I've always thought it sounds quite exciting. So there'll be people listening to this who were the first generation to live in Roundhay, the first generation to live in Letchworth, in Welwyn, in Milton Keynes. What's it actually like? Do you have a sort of pioneer spirit? Everything's new, everything's shiny. 0345 6060 973. It's 11:17.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:19 is the time. Talking about what happens if you take your information from the Daily Telegraph with reference to that absolute nonsense about 1 in 12 Londoners being illegal immigrants. Kemi Badenoch fell into that trap yesterday with her conversation about the new borders head working from Finland. I didn't catch PMQs, but I'm told it was her worst ever. And the worst bit of the worst ever PMQs involved her believing something about a civil servant working from home in Finland without knowing anything else about the story. But again, if I'd shared that with you on the radio yesterday morning and then the truth emerged yesterday afternoon, there is nothing that requires me to say, oh, sorry, we got that one horribly wrong. It turns out that nobody's going to be doing their job from Finland, and the bloke that they're talking about in the first place was actually hired by the people that I've been a cheerleader for since 1944. So the Tories hired the bloke. He's been working from... don't let me spoil it, because it's a superb misinformation for you, which we will be sharing before 11:30. But I want to get stuck in now to the new towns conversation. Alex is in Alsace. That's not a new town. That's a French region. Alex, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I listened to you quite frequently. Last time I called you told me I didn't win many lollipops, so I'll try and be more precise today. But I moved into Milton Keynes, got a new house there in mid-80s. So the city was quite well developed, but my area, we were one of the first people in. I think we were the first road. And it was extraordinary because I couldn't get a mortgage. I was just about to get married with my wife. We both had good jobs, and the banks wouldn't give us a mortgage. But one of the banks...
So it wasn't a new town when you... It was already 20 years old when you moved there?
Probably about 20 years old, yeah. But our area was new, and it had the feeling of a new town. There was building all over the place. It was quite incredible. One of the things I like to say, we couldn't get mortgages, and the Development Corporation were offering a shared ownership scheme. And I went over there with my wife and said, what do we have to do? He said, have you got a job? I said, yeah. He said, you're okay then. And what they did was you paid a part rent, part mortgage. And I said, what do we have to do? He said, well, we release them every Saturday in a block. So I got onto the pavement outside on Wednesday night, and we queued for 3 days. I was number 5 in the queue.
Really?
And it was quite, yeah.
And was that,
incredible.
I mean, looking back, was that probably your only path towards home ownership at the time?
I don't know. It might not have been, but it just felt the right thing to do.
I love that idea of it feeling like groundbreaking, and you're moving sort of. Where were you before, if you don't mind me asking?
I was in rented accommodation because I was working.
Yeah, but whereabouts geographically?
Bedford.
Okay, so you go from an old town to a new town, and it felt like a brave new world.
It did, and it was absolutely well planned. There's a book about it, The Planning of Milton Keynes, which I've got a copy of.
There you go.
And in the end,
that's a page turner.
They scaled back. They scaled back. It was even more ambitious. But
do you know what the problem with that book is?
What's that?
I know how it ends. All right, it's all right. I'm here all week. Try the veal. It is 22 minutes after 11. Alex, take care. Simon is in Haywards Heath. Simon, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. On this ridiculous subject of the government proposing to build 1.5 million homes. Well, first of all, there aren't any planners in the planning authorities to make that happen.
Well, you're a bit of a party pooper.
I'm unfortunately a realist.
Oh, I hate that word. Down with that kind of thing. Down with realist.
Okay.
1.5 million homes. Okay, go on. Tell me more.
I think there needs to be a sort of a definition of new towns here, because there is something called urban extensions, which essentially are places like Bluewater and Ebbsfleet and all those sort of places near the Dartford Tunnel, and they are massive swathes of housing and infrastructure that take years. They take 10 to 20 years to complete.
But then no one's disputing that. They're just saying they want to get it started before the next election.
Yes. Well, started is fine. I think without any kind of real planning infrastructure or any
we've done it before. We've done it before, so why couldn't we do it again? And remember, listen, I'm not being Pollyanna-ish, but you're coming from a standing start. In 46, the Government Act was brought in, the New Towns Act. They wouldn't have had the planners then in 46, would they? Because they'd have been twiddling their thumbs. Well, actually, they'd have been at war for the last 5 or 6 years. But the idea that we haven't got the people to do it yesterday doesn't mean that we can't do it tomorrow.
No, except since then there have been all sorts of acts brought in to prevent certain things happening.
But they've already set their sights on that, haven't they? That was the other thing that we were talking about before I went on jury service, was the war on NIMBYism and the loosening up, if you like, a laxative effect on planning. If I were to give you a personality transplant and turn you into glass half full rather than glass half empty, what would you say? What would you say then about the prospect of 6 new towns being underway by the end of the decade?
I think it would be absolutely marvellous, and I think that I think the skills and labour shortages and the supply chain issues and the infrastructure issues and the water and all the other all the things they throw in at this scenario.
The thing is, I think you're probably right, but I can't quite believe, especially when you're talking about a government or a prime minister at least, who is often mocked for being dull. So somebody who is this is not a Boris Johnson type figure. It's not someone who's going to announce 40 new hospitals while knowing full well that it's never going to happen. If you have sort of a positive view of Keir Starmer for any reason at all, it would be that he is not that kind of politician. So I can't quite believe that it's as doomed as you describe it from the outset. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it. I mean, why store up? Why expose yourself to what you see as an absolutely inevitable failure if it is absolutely crystal clear already that it will fail?
I think looking from my perspective, looking at the local authorities and how they're set up. For example, Stroud had a local plan examined just the other day, or just this week actually, and they were due to bring forward 800 homes, and they just realised as a sort of a light bulb moment that they're 200 million short of getting the infrastructure together to make that happen. So that's all in the bin.
The one element of your contribution that I think I can respond to is that legislatively, new town corporations become their own planning authority, so they don't have to worry about local authority planners.
No, and then we open up the compulsory purchase discussions about swathes of land and all those things.
Yeah, but you can't do it. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, Simon. You can't build you can't build a town without compulsory purchases.
No, indeed, and you can't build a town without the workers. And
well, that is where I think I can't give you a personality transplant, because that's not an opinion. That's just counting. Where are they going to come from? The people to build all these houses? Sorry, go on.
So they're not coming from anywhere. And to further frustrate matters, the grandfather rights for the construction workers were knocked on the head at the end of December 24. So the people that were working in the sector who were of an age where they hadn't qualified with NVQs and these other qualifications to deem them fit for purpose, they've all had to retire or requalify at cost. So someone in their 50s or 60s may wish to say, well, do I want to spend 3,000 to 5,000 on training just to show that I can do a job I've been doing for 40 years? That's a problem.
Yes, it is. And I thank you for taking my mild ribbing in such good spirits. One of the friends I made on jury service actually works in the field of construction training, and he's very evangelical about it. I even recorded a voice message for his boss. He was so excited to learn that we were on the same cohort of potential jurors. But he was very evangelical about it, and going up and down the country, whipping up enthusiasm for apprenticeships and getting people into the construction industry. But that sounds to me like a seed, not a blossomed plant. It is 11:28. As promised, I've got an absolute doozy of a missed information for you.
Missed information.
Thank you, Emily. So if you get your news from right-wing newspapers and don't care at all whether or not it's true, then in recent weeks you would have been wanging on endlessly about there being 1 in 12 illegal immigrants living in London, and probably completely ignoring the fact that the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Mail, the Sun and sundry other right-wing newspapers had to apologise for disseminating such blatant bilge. Then yesterday, if you were in the business of getting all of your quotes, information, end quotes from right-wing newspapers that don't bother doing the most cursory of fact-checking anymore, you might have fallen for the absolute nonsense that the Labour government had just appointed a box-fresh Borders boss, but he was going to be working from Finland. Somewhat unfortunately for anybody left in the Conservative Party, the current leader obviously falls into that trap of believing the headlines she reads in right-wing newspapers and not bothering herself before standing up in public, not only to check the facts, but also she keeps accusing the other fella of not doing his homework, which is how you end up, and this by anybody's standards is a very, very bad day at work.
The government is now recruiting a new Chief Inspector of Borders who lives in Finland and wants to work from home. This is not serious. Why should the British public put up with this?
The individual in question was appointed in 2019 by the last government to a senior position. He then worked for 5 years from Finland. We've changed that, and he's now going to be working from the United Kingdom full-time.
So, I mean, that is beyond bad. I've said it before and I've said it again. Are there people in her team actively trying to make her look stupid in public? Maybe when she said, I never have to apologise for anything because I never make any gaffes, they took it as a challenge. They said 10 quid to the first person who gets her to make an enormous gaffe at PMQs, the biggest political stage that the leader of the opposition has. Not only was the bloke that she was trying to use as a weapon with which to hit Keir Starmer over the head, and let's be honest, he's an easy target. Not only was the bloke hired by her own party and serving in this in a senior role while she was in government, but he did so from Finland and won't be doing so, having been given the new job, if all things unfold as expected by the current government. I mean, that is about as bad as it gets, but thank goodness she never makes any gaffes, because if she did, that would be terrible. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
6 minutes to 12, 11:34 in old money. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, talking about new towns. Talking about new towns sounds like a really bad song, that, doesn't it? A really bad blues song. Talking about new towns in whatever way you want to, really. I mean, I'm interested in what it's like to be in one when it's new. As in brand spanking new, as in you are the very first generation to live there when the ribbon is cut, so to speak, because that's an experience not many of us would have had. I'm also drawn to the question of how feasible it is for us to have half a dozen new towns underway before the time of the next general election. I had a colleague in Milton Keynes. Are they in Milton Keynes? Is it in Milton Keynes? I had a colleague in Milton Keynes poised to ask Keir Starmer the question about the workforce and the impacts that Brexit has had on the workforce and the likely impacts that those impacts have had on the workforce would have upon the plausibility of building new towns, as in where are the workers going to come from, given that in 2016 we all shouted, 52% of the electorate shouted very loudly from the rooftops, go back to where you came from. And many of them did. But she was prevented from asking the question. Would you like to guess why? Because 35 farmers turned up in tractors to disrupt the event. Oh, I tell you what, speaking about right-wing media, you wouldn't want to be a farmer tomorrow, would you? Imagine what they're going to have to say, all the right-wing journalists are going to have to say about farming protests preventing journalists from doing actual journalism. You remember when it was environmental protesters that did so? These people were spitting nails. They were livid. And now farmers are actually disrupting journalists' ability to do actual journalism. There's going to be fireworks tomorrow from the right-wing media. What about all the ambulances? If a journalist can't even ask a question, what about all the ambulances? So I'd set your clocks for that one. Farmers are going to be coming in for an almighty kicking across the whole of the right-wing media tomorrow, because they're now not only bringing London to a standstill on a regular basis, but disrupting actual press conferences, which is the only opportunity the public have, via the Fourth Estate, to ask the politicians about the policy announcements that they're making. Yeah, there may be a slight danger of sarcasm. It was a regional media huddle that was completely disrupted by the arrival of 35 tractors, and we were hoping to get some questions in there about the new towns, which seems to me to be an issue of rather important national interest. But I digress. 11:36 is the time. I've got I've done that. What have I got? I've got an unhinged headline for you. It's an absolute doozy. And before we go to Michael, who's in Buckshaw Village in Lancashire, which is an entirely new town made of entirely new houses, so he can tell us what it's like. I just want to row back, if I may, to the reference that our caller from Slovakia made to the 1938 Munich Agreement, and that line, it was about us but without us. This was when they essentially signed off on, the international community, if you like, signed off on Hitler's annexation of Sudetenland. Because there was one moment in the White House yesterday, in the Oval Office, extraordinary scenes. Elon Musk turned up with one of his children on his shoulders for a press conference. That would strike confidence into the hearts of Ukrainians, wouldn't it? Who've been at war for years against a totalitarian oppressor, and the de facto co-president is treating the Oval Office like some sort of impromptu creche. But this moment here, this is dripping with echoes of 1938.
Do you expect Ukraine...
Say it, what?
Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace. I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I think.
So there it is. Do you view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process? That was not a good war to go into. They invaded Ukraine. They had tanks on the outskirts of the capital city. They were dropping missiles and bombs like it was going out of fashion, and Ukraine elected to defend herself. And the President of the United States of America says that was not a good war to go into. What does that even mean? What does that even mean? So if you hoped, let alone thought, there was some exaggeration in the first hour of the programme today, there is conclusive proof that there wasn't. And again, to bring it back to the British media, you'd have to ask people who aren't calling it what it is, why they're not calling it what it is, because we know what it is. It's appeasement on a treacherous scale. It's a complete abandonment by the West, and the UK government is not as on the hook for this as the US government, but it's early days. A complete abandonment of the people of Ukraine. That was not a good war to go into. In other words, if Vladimir Putin invades you, just let him. 11:39 is the time. Back to Newtowns. Michael is in Buckshaw Village. Michael, what can you tell us?
Hello, James.
Hello, Michael.
Yeah. I moved to Lancashire in 1968 to work at the Royal Ordnance Factory Chorley, which is a 1,000 acres munition site.
Gosh.
In the late 80s, the factories were transferred to BAE Systems, who closed the ammunition side down and transferred it to South Wales.
Right.
It's now been redeveloped as a 1,000-acre Buckshaw Village.
Oh.
Apart from a couple of old farmhouses which were here before World War II, all the other housing is brand new. It's built in a variety of styles, which is very attractive. Buckshaw Station, which had been closed for years, has been reopened as Buckshaw Parkway, which is very popular with commuters. and I think it's absolutely great to live here.
Who's moved there? Who has moved in?
I don't know, people from all over Lancashire, I think.
I love it. And one of the things Keir Starmer has said about some of the places he's visited is that you can't tell the difference between the private housing and the social housing. There's a real, I don't know if that's true in Buckshaw Village, but the people would have moved there who were previously living in some pretty unpleasant circumstances.
I'm not sure how much social housing there is here. I doubt whether there's very much, but there's a good variety of housing.
And is everything shiny, Michael?
Yeah.
Everything's brand new. And so you're living now on the site where you used to work?
Yep.
Well, that's nice. There's a symmetry there, isn't there?
Yeah, when I moved here, our first house is 34 North Terrace, which was one of the MOD police houses.
Gosh.
And I now live at 34 The Court. So it's full circle in 50 years.
That's lovely. That's the same number as well. You're not a supporter of Chorley Town, are you?
No, I've not voted to. I'm a Newcastle United supporter.
Fair enough, because if you're a supporter of Chorley Town, we'd have to have some words. Thank you, Michael. It is 11:41. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Alison is in Bury St Edmunds to talk to us about new towns. Alison, what can you tell us?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
We moved, my mum, my dad, my brother and sister and I, into a northwest town called Skelmersdale in 1977.
Yes.
And we moved from Liverpool because it was kind of... It was to Liverpool what Milton Keynes was to London.
I didn't know that. Well, that shows my southern bias, doesn't it, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I always find Skelmersdale, if you struggle with the Scouse accent, Skelmersdale is one of the best words to practice on.
Did you say scam?
I know.
Yeah, scam. Dad still lives there. My sister still lives there. It is actually still growing. Right. Every time I go up, there's more houses being built. If they carry on the way they're going, it'll, join Ormskirk.
Yes.
So, but no, I went to school there, started my working life there, and we loved it. It has everything you need. Doesn't have any traffic lights though, which is amazing.
Really?
It's all roundabout. Yeah,
that's a design decision. I think Milton Keynes is like that as well. I see. So you don't need traffic lights because it's
no.
Okay.
No.
And it's a weird one, isn't it? This is why I'm glad you were listening, and Michael and others, because you've either got a proper view on this or you know nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no middle ground. And so the people who've got a proper view on it seem to be largely positive about the idea of trying to build a few more.
Oh, I think it's exciting. I think, the more we have new towns, then, you can't always keep building and adding on to the existing. I mean, I live in Bury St Edmunds, and that's what we're doing around here. I mean, I remember taking my driving test in 1987, and where one of our districts is now, Moreton Hall, that was all fields. It's now not. Yeah. And over the years, it's just built and built and built, which is okay.
If you're expanding an old town, then you're building on fields that were previously your neighbours' views. Whereas if you're building a new town, apart from, a couple of farmers who are probably too busy driving their tractors through press conferences anyway, apart from a couple of farmers, you're not actually... I know areas of natural beauty notwithstanding and all that kind of thing, but it actually makes more sense. It has less of an impact, oddly, on people than expansion does.
Exactly. Where my dad lives, we have the Beacon Park behind us, and it's beautiful. You can go up to the top there and see both sides. You can see all the way over Skelmersdale. Literally, on a good day, you can actually see Blackpool Tower. And if you look the other way, you can see all the way over Wigan. So, and they haven't built on there. It's fine. And it's so central. The M58 is just off there. There's factories.
It's amazing. Do you work for the Skelmersdale Tourist Board? Are you the Bury St Edmunds branch of the Skelmersdale Tourist Board? That's not a busy week, is it? You get a bonus today. Yeah, exactly that. You get a big bonus for getting on LBC. I like it, Alison, because that's why I talked about not wanting to do a poo-poo hour, like poo-pooing the idea, because it's so easy to do. But, of course, fears about who's going to do the actual building remain, and they are big. But 6, or getting 7 or 8 new towns underway in the next few years is actually exciting, and everybody who's got a personal connection to a previous new town so far seems to be broadly positive. Some of the areas that are being looked at include between Derby and Nottingham. That's of a particular interest to me. And I'll tell you what, if anyone knows why that's of a particular interest to me, I'll give you the money myself. That's very, very personal for me. Literally the area between Derby and Nottingham. I may tell you why after this, but it's really personal. The area between Bedford and Northampton and the area between Stafford and Stoke. They're also looking near Nottingham, Stafford and Northampton, as well as both sides of the Thames estuary. And I hadn't thought of that before I spoke to Alison. Because I always think about the view from my bedroom window, which was fields, just on the edge of a town. And there were always stories about plans to build on those fields. And there was always upset about it because at the moment the people living on the edge of the fields live on the edge of the fields. Fast forward 10 years and they're living on the edge of houses. They're just a house in the middle of houses. And you can see why that feels more impactful than starting from scratch in the middle of quotes nowhere, end quotes. And nobody actually then has their habitation impacted. Except badgers. It's 11:46.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:49. I always come back from a few days off. If you haven't noticed, I've been away, and I don't know what I'm on about. I do apologise, but I was doing jewellery service. I haven't told you the details yet, have I? Did I mention what happened? Did I say I didn't get picked? I did say that on air. Just checking. You can rewind on Global Player, and pause live radio. Download it now at globalplayer.com. All the best bits. But whenever I come back, I always try to revivify some of the little gimmicks that we have on the show. And then over the course of the next few days, I'll slowly start forgetting again. But and I always determine, it's like New Year's resolutions. When I was on newspapers, my office was on the other side of Tower Bridge. I know what you're thinking. How can it be the other side if I don't know what side you're on now? But it was on the other side of Tower Bridge from the station. So I get off the station at Blackfriars and I'd walk and I'd have New Year's resolutions. And by the time I was walking back that evening, I'd broken all of them. They never lasted more than... I'll work harder in the office. I'll do this, I'll do that. I won't go for a pint at lunchtime. I'll keep my notes better. I'll do this. I'll write up my interviews before deadline. And walking back over the bridge that evening, all gone. It's the same now. It's 30 years, 20 years later. I'm exactly the same, 25 years later. So I come back and say, we must remember to do more unhinged headlines and we must get on top of missed information. Maybe even bring back Woke Watch and come up with some new ideas. And then on day one, I'm quite good at it. Tomorrow is day 2, so do tune in to find out whether or not the enthusiasm continues. And then by Monday, I've probably forgotten about all of them. But for now, we've got an absolute doozy.
Unhinged headline.
And what I love about this is I think that sub-editors at The Telegraph have started competing with each other to get onto unhinged headline. So this is what the print sub-editor has written on the latest nonsense by that Alistair Heath bloke. Brexit was brilliant, Liz Truss is a genius, all the usuals. Starmer's Britain is succumbing to an outbreak of suicidal empathy. That's pretty unhinged, right? So someone has written that and sat back and thought, we're going to get on unhinged headline tomorrow. And then the online sub-editor, so the person who is responsible for writing the headlines on the website as opposed to the print edition, well, they have seen this unhinged headline as a gauntlet thrown down by their colleagues on the actual newspaper, on the print edition of the newspaper. So they have written a headline for exactly the same bilge, which appears, I think we need another one. Actually, is it too late to put together an even more unhinged? I'll do the even more and you do the unhinged headline. All right, are you ready? So what the online sub-editor has tried to do is introduce, for the same column, remember, the same bilge by the same Herbert, he's tried to do an even more
unhinged headline.
And he's written, a parasite is devouring the soul of Britain. A parasite is devouring the soul of Britain. And that has 2 headlines on the same article appearing in different editions of the same organ. So I think war has broken out at the Telegraph over who can get themselves on unhinged headline first. And of course, I've ruined their game today because they are both supremely well qualified, albeit that the parasite devouring the soul of Britain, if I had to pick a winner, would be the winner.
Unhinged headline.
Susan Edenbridge to talk to me about new towns. Sue, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
first time caller.
Welcome.
I'm very nervous.
It's only me.
But, I know. In the late 70s, I think it was between 76 and 81, I worked for Peterborough Development Corporation, which was a new town. And I used to be there.
Peterborough was a new town?
It is a view town, yes.
Peterborough?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
No one tells me anything.
Absolutely.
No one tells me. Peterborough?
It's huge. It's
No,
absolutely
I've heard
huge.
of Peterborough. I just had no idea it was new. I thought it had been around for ages.
Oh, we were in great competition with Milton Keynes.
Well, I had no
at the
idea.
time,
You live and learn. Sorry, carry on.
That's all right. Yes, and I was their London rep for the south of London, anything below the Thames, really.
It's got a 12th century cathedral, Sue.
I know, and it's right in the centre.
Well, it can't be a new town. It's got a 12th century cathedral.
I know. It was built around the small
All right.
city of-
So, no, okay. So I understand. Whereas Milton Keynes did not exist in any way,
No,
shape
it
or
didn't.
form.
No, but there was a village... Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
No, I'm interrupting you. You carry on.
It was Bletchley, I think.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Village
It was.
called Bletchley.
Yeah, of course it was.
Yes, so I used to interview people who applied to move to Peterborough from London.
Yeah.
And I used to go to their own homes, interview them. And what they had to do was, first of all, there had to be no rent arrears, etc., etc.
Yes.
And if they were of working age, they had to get a job before they could actually be given the council house.
Oh.
So I gave them the information to...
That's a right interesting thing. I had no idea. So it really was a sort of, what would you call it? A kind of a planned...
It was, yes.
Not repopulation, a planned movement of people. I mean, literally. To relieve the pressures on the infrastructure and the housing market, in your case, in London.
Absolutely, yeah. And people were absolutely thrilled when they were approved.
I bet.
And pensioners went to live... they had to have family in Peterborough so they could settle properly. It was very well organised.
So how do you greet the news of up to a dozen new towns to be under construction by the election?
Well, it worked in the 70s. I'm not sure. I think literally it is a good idea because it's new homes, if people are living in dire circumstances. Yeah, it's great. But if
and it's doable. It's doable.
It is doable as long as it's planned properly.
And
the
then
planning is...
Yeah, and then the question of who's going to do the building comes fast upon the question of the planning, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the organisation and the jobs, of course.
And all of this is, of course, contingent upon the fact that Britain hasn't succumbed to an outbreak of suicidal empathy by the time that they actually start building the houses, or indeed had its soul devoured by a parasite. Because I'll tell you something for nothing, Sue. If the country has had its soul devoured by a parasite, we ain't going to be building any houses anytime soon.
Well, I don't know why I'm laughing at that, really.
That's the nature of unhinged headline. If you didn't laugh, you'd cry. It's better to laugh. Thank you, Sue. I love that idea of being a London rep. So tell me why would you like to move to Peterborough? Well, I hear it's got a 12th century cathedral, but is somehow also a new town. I'm in. Aaron is in Farnham. Aaron, what would you like to say?
It's Aaron, but don't worry, everyone makes that mistake.
Well, how do you spell it? A-R-R?
So it's like aardvark. AA.
Well, that's why I said Aaron. If it had been A-R-R, I'd have said Aaron. But no, it's just me being pedantic. Sorry, Aaron.
No, I'm joking. It's just...
It's not like Aardvark, is it? Because then you'd be Aaron.
That's true. So
it's your fault.
I'll take Aaron. I'll blame my mum. She wanted to be first in the alphabet.
Love it. Well, she certainly pulled that off. What made you pick up the phone, if you can remember?
Yeah. So I work for a small bank, and we specialise in funding SME house builders.
Oh.
My point was really, yes, the government are going to be able to build this amount of homes with will and intention, but it's who are going to be building these homes. So to be able to get to those sort of numbers and to do it on the scale that they're talking about is going to be top 10 national house builders. If not, it will be the top 5 house builders,
yes.
the ones that are actually able to do this. And I don't really see that helping anyone, both in terms of the new towns that are going to be created, in terms of how they look. All it's going to be doing is creating profits for their shareholders.
Well,
they are not going to be as interested in terms of the design and what they're actually creating as a place. Obviously, I'm a bit biased, but I would say a collection of small regional people that are from an area, house builders that is,
yes,
are going to create something that will have a legacy.
Well, let me read you something, because I think you've touched on something that's really important and which I think the government may have slightly preempted, may have seen coming. So the new towns will be led by regional development corporations. And the initial injection of public funding to buy the land would then be paid back after the sites were sold off at a higher value to the private developers, in part to pay for the infrastructure. So the money would go back into the public sector to pay in part for the infrastructure. And they will very much take into account the sort of local history and the local heritage, looking for 40% of homes to be affordable, including social housing, and a new code will demand that buildings have character and are designed with reference to local history and are on tree-lined streets with guaranteed public transport, GP surgeries and schools, and access to nature and play areas. Now, we can both go, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it, but that's not where you rang in from. You rang in from thinking that they weren't even planning to do it.
Okay, so to be fair, I do know that already. And so my dad works in the industry. So my father works in the industry as well, and so does my sister.
Yes.
So we're all focused on the SME sector, and actually he's part of an all-party parliamentary group that are the voice of the SME house builders to government at the moment. So it was with the previous government, and obviously now under Labour.
And you are all, and I think most people listening would be on side with you, keen to see SMEs involved in this rather than just the usual household name massive developers.
Well, what I'm just saying is their pure interest is their return, and ultimately their shareholders. And we know how they've behaved with their land banks.
We do.
And having a monopoly over the entire market, with them producing at the moment 90% of all homes.
And yet the code is designed to counter some of those problems. We can now say, well, we'll believe it when we see it, because as you point out, history is not.
There was just one point to make on the side of it, which I said to your previous lady, was Poundbury is a fantastic example of what can be done when you've got the correct stewardship. And
Cranberry?
Obviously, Poundbury.
That's the King's. That's the King's place.
It was the Prince's, and now it's the King's, and he's also got 3 or 4 other schemes that he's running nationally. But he is actually really championing having local.
Well, Starmer has said that he is the inspiration for these bigger plans. So there's at least something there for you to be optimistic about, isn't there?
I hope so.
I hope so too.
I hope so.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Aaron, as in Aardvark.
Yeah.
It's 12:01. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Late for the news. Hey, old habits die hard. It's Thursday. You know what that means after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
When it's after 12 is the time. So you think I'm a creature of habit? I come back from a few days off and I'm determined to revivify all of my wizard wheezes and gimmicks on the programme, and then it slowly... You're pathetic. Just because there wasn't a mystery hour last week, you've completely forgotten that there is one this week, which means this is your best chance ever of getting through to mystery. It is I haven't got the day wrong, have I? Keith's playing the jingles. It must be I didn't realise I was here today. Perhaps you haven't noticed. You think you've been listening to Lewis Goodall for the last 2 hours, thinking to yourself, thank you very much, thinking to yourself, he's not on very good form today, old Lewis. He's sounding a lot worse than he did on the first 3 days of this week. But no, it's Thursday. It's just gone 12 noon. It's LBC. I'm James O'Brien. It's time for Mystery Hour, your weekly opportunity to achieve the sort of satisfaction not ordinarily available anywhere else on your radio dial. So, if you've got a question, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. But first, some top drawer Crawley related content. I'll say that again. But first, some absolutely scintillating Crawley related content. Who'd have thought you'd get 2 or 3 messages about Crawley in the space of the same nanosecond? Why might that be? Crawley was a new town. Did you know Crawley was a new town? Debbie did. She's in Southampton now, but they were relocated from Coulsdon to Crawley in the late 50s. We had a fabulous childhood there, James. It was wonderful. New homes, new schools, new shops, new surgeries, new swimming pools. You get the picture. There was a lot of new stuff. Green spaces, parks. I think it was one of 8 new towns. I'm all for the new ones. We left in 1973 and I went back 2 years ago. It's doubled in size and is now encroaching on Horsham. It was buzzing because of Gatwick and the Manor Royal Industrial Estate. I'm all for new towns, writes Debbie, who is trumped in the Crawley content stakes by Lol, who's been in touch to tell me you might want to sit down for this. This is one of the biggest revelations we've ever done on the programme. Debbie in Southampton, you are going to find this particularly fascinating. Are you ready for this? This is from Lol. My sister, writes Lol, went to school with the daughter of the man who named all of the streets in Crawley. It's a bit selfish, a bit greedy. all of the streets. So wherever you lived, Debs, in Southampton, Lowell's sister's friend's dad, I'm not even making that up, Lowell's sister's friend's dad. Well, I presume they were friends. Schoolmate, there you go. Lowell's sister's schoolmate's dad named your street. That's sensational. Or not. But it is top Crawley related. That's not going to be a new feature on the programme. Crawley related content with James O'Brien. Although I am going to remember it because it's got the benefit of alliteration. 7 after 12 is the time. Mystery Hour. There you go. That's more like it. Mystery Hour. There is a prize for my favourite contribution of the week. The prize is a Mystery Hour board game. Your very own. To keep Mystery Hour board game. Full terms and conditions are at lbc.co.uk because it is actually, despite perhaps the impression I sometimes give on this programme, it is a proper radio programme presented by an actual professional presenter, and this is a bona fide competition. So it has terms and conditions at lbc.co.uk. And you can find out more about the board game at mysteryhour.co.uk yourself. 7 minutes after 12 is the time. Shall we crack on? Some people, I don't like this, some people only just noticing I'm back now, which means you only tune in the hope of mystery. What do you think I do for the rest of the week? What am I, chopped liver? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. And I probably should reveal, unless someone asks the question, what it is about the plan to build a new town between Derby and Nottingham, which is of particular personal, very personal resonance to me. Daniel is in Portishead. Daniel, question or answer?
A question, please.
Carry on.
I would like to know why hospital gowns do up at the back instead of the front.
So that you haven't got any holes down your front.
Yeah, well, I suppose so.
Does that work? Doesn't really.
Kind of, I suppose.
No, I
Not
don't
really.
think it does. The back, you don't put. It's the same with hairdressing ones. Yeah, that'll be it because you're gonna more likely to get stuff down the front, and then it would go. Well, what do you wear underneath your hospital gown? It's not like you're wearing your clothes, is it?
Yeah.
Is it because someone else will take, so that if I'm putting yours on,
it would be easier to keep the gown pulled across your front easier than it would be.
Yeah, but that's if you're doing it yourself. If I am putting your gown on you, then your modesty is protected. If I'm coming at you from behind,
debatable.
No, it's not debatable at all. So I'm not gonna see your front bits, am I?
Perhaps I'm more embarrassed with my back bits than my front bits.
You are a niche market, Daniel. You are a very niche customer or patient. But I don't know. Actually, I can't let. What's wrong with your back bits, mate?
No, nothing special. There's nothing wrong right in my front bits either.
I don't know that we've done this one before, but it sort of sense.
I would have thought surely they're going to need emergency access to the front of your body for your airways or chest compressions rather than to give you an emergency
the more you think,
colonoscopy.
you're absolutely an emergency colonoscopy notwithstanding. You would have thought that frontal access was probably more important than rear access. So we shall try and find out for you, without reflecting upon at what point in that conversation you could have tuned in to find it the most baffling and or indecent. Joanne is in South Shields. Joanne, question or answer?
Question, James.
Carry on.
It's an urban myth.
Oh.
I'm your age, and as a kid we had swimming lessons.
Yes.
And one of the things I was told by a friend in the pool, so this wasn't the instructor, is if you urinated in the pool, they put special chemicals in and a red ring would appear around you to embarrass you, so
Yes.
you'd never do it again. So I didn't for years. Where did that come from?
When did you start again?
Oh, well, I must have stopped putting chemicals in, Jim.
By the time you started, where did the rumour come from? I think probably it was true at some point.
That's what I wondered. Was there ever any truth to it?
Yeah.
Or was it
Okay.
grown-ups trying to
We've
scare
all
kids?
heard
I
it.
don't
We've
know.
all heard it. It goes with those old signs they used to have, doesn't it? In the
No petting, no bombing.
no petting, no bombing, no splashing. All of those. Was there ever a chemical that would? I don't know. I've got it somewhere in my head. I think I might have.
It terrified me, James.
Well, it would do, wouldn't it? I mean, frankly.
Yeah.
You're on. But anyway, even though there is no chemical, Jan, you should probably stop doing it. It's just antisocial.
I will.
Thank you.
I will.
Thank you. 12:11 is the time. Hospital gowns. What was that lad's name? I've written it down wrong. What was it? Daniel, of course it was. Daniel's, why do hospital gowns do up at the back, not the front? And where did it come from? The old story about swimming pools having chemicals in them that would be activated were you to urinate. the water. Liz is in Petswood. Liz, question or answer?
It's a question. Thank you, James.
Yes.
So when you have breakfast, like if you're like me, you can have the same breakfast 5, 6, sometimes 7 mornings a week, and you always fancy it and you love it.
Yeah.
But if someone said to you had to have the same dinner, even 2 nights running, you'd say, "Oh God, yeah, no, I'm not having that. I had it last night," and you genuinely don't fancy it, but you somehow fancy breakfast the same every single morning.
What would we, if this was an academic subject, what would we file it under, your question? Is it psychology? Biology?
Well, I don't know, because it's a genuine feeling as well, isn't it? You really, really couldn't face having the same dinner. Imagine if you had to have it like 7 nights, the same dinner.
I do in November.
In
October, November, I can go for 3 or 4 nights on the trot having sprouts. With blue cheese and lardons and chestnuts.
Okay, but what about, I've gone like months and actually years having the same breakfast.
What do you have?
I have mixed berries with Greek yogurt and seeds on top, and I love it every single morning.
Okay. These are, you're right. Most people do not really mix it up much at breakfast time.
No.
But all other meals. Some people, didn't Dominic Raab have the same lunch every day when he was a government minister? Didn't he have the same sandwich from Pret every? Lunch is different though, isn't it? But
the thing is as well, you couldn't sustain. You could do 3 or 4 nights on the trot if you had to.
No, but look at that though, because breakfast you start off like, absolutely, it's absolutely unremarkable to have the same breakfast every single day. Then you get to lunch,
and months,
and you get to lunch, and you think, no, I can get my head around someone who's going to get the same sandwich every day because they've decided it's their favorite. But by the time you get to dinner, it sounds insane.
2 nights.
It sounds absolutely bonkers.
I can't have that. I had it last night.
I had it last week. I don't want that. Well, no, not last week's all right. You could have it on a 7-day cycle like we did when we were kids.
Yeah, exactly. But any more than like 4 days, without a 4-day gap or 5-day gap, you're in trouble.
It's a brilliant question, but I'd be amazed if anyone can answer it.
Well, maybe a psychologist, because I think it might be sort of something like that. Maybe
not been up for very long, and therefore your brain is kind of. Let's find out.
Yeah,
mixed berries tomorrow. Thank you, Liz. It is coming up to 12:15. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Stephen is in El Cadiza in Spain. Stephen, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Good morning, and glad to have you back.
Thank you very much. Thank you for noticing.
No, I did. I was in a long hair rock and roll band a few years ago, and we always used to start the songs with the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4.
1, 2,
very much like the Ramones.
If you were playing,
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. However, choreographers and dancers start things 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Why?
I think I know this.
Oh,
when I say that, I've worked it out. I think I've worked it out while you were asking the question, so it's almost certainly wrong. But if you don't want everyone starting at the same time, Stephen. So
you do.
No, you don't. You've got the orchestra, right? Here's the band. 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't want the dancers to start yet, do you? So the music's up and running. And now it's time for the dance. You go 5, 6, 7, 8, and then all the dancers start dancing while the music carries on.
I don't know that's right.
Come on, that's genius.
I don't think it is, unless you were a qualified dancer. I'm not sure that's correct.
I might not have any qualifications, Stephen, but I've got the moves.
I'm sure you bust a move more than once a week.
Walk the dog, mow the lawn, all the moves, because there's no reason why you wouldn't just say 1, 2, 3, 4 again, is there?
Exactly. But it seems specific to dancers. They go 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, they do. You're on. Okay, I'll try and find. I'm not going to be absolutely amazed if my answer turns out to be the correct answer, but I'm certainly not going to take it as definitive at this stage in proceedings. Stephen, thank you. Mind how you go. Why did the band break up? Artistic differences?
No, just the fact that we were playing sort of long hair heavy metal when Nirvana hit, and it all was a bit unpopular. And it all sort of fell apart like
overtaken events,
like you would say.
Events, dear boy, events. Overtaken by events. 16 minutes after 12 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 12:18. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I needed to clear my throat there. It wasn't a sort of, it's me. Why do we do hospital gowns up at the back? Was there ever a chemical in swimming pools that would be activated in the event of you doing a wee? Why are we perfectly comfortable eating the same meal for breakfast every day, but would balk at the very notion of doing the same meal for dinner every day? Don't ring me to tell me you have the same meal for dinner every day. You're extraordinary. This question is confined to the realms of the ordinary. And finally, why do we count bands in with a 1, 2, 3, 4 and dancers with a 5, 6, 7, 8? Ahmed's in Leeds. Ahmed, question or answer?
It's a question, James. Honoured to speak to you. Thank you for taking the call.
Well, thank you.
I've always wondered, you have these competitions on TV and online where you could win huge, big properties on the coast of Cornwall, whatever. And I've always wondered, I'm sure the average person puts in for it. But what if someone wins it who doesn't have the means to upkeep the property immediately? What happens? I've always wondered, what do they do with something so big that's completely out of their means to upkeep? They haven't got, I don't know, I've always wondered that.
Wouldn't you just sell it?
Well, even the selling would incur a big fee.
But you could pay the fee after you've got the money for the house, couldn't you?
Possibly, but I don't know.
I'm trying to imagine. I'm trying to see the mystery here. I like the way you're thinking. So you're working in, I don't know, you're working night shifts in Roundhay, for example, and you win an enormous mansion in St. Ives.
Yeah.
I mean, you're still going to need an income, and you haven't got a job in St. Ives.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even if you're on quite a good scratch, you can't upend everything and go and live in the massive. So, you'd stick it on Airbnb, mate, wouldn't you?
But would you really? Something so precious. That's worth 1.1 million.
Who's going? I don't know if they. I don't know. I mean, in the sense that Mystery Hour usually involves questions that only really have one answer.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah,
I don't know how there could only be one answer to, because there's 10 houses here, and there's 10 different answers to the question that you've asked.
Yeah.
So we've stuck it on Airbnb. We've stuck it on Airbnb, James. Oh, we've sold ours, James. Or my mother-in-law lives in it, James, for free, and she keeps it all spick and span, and we just go there for our holidays and high days and bank holidays. So I don't know what. I mean, are you thinking of a specific scenario? Something like a scenario.
Possibly. I mean, or maybe someone has experienced.
All right. Well, but that's not really Mystery Hour. That's a normal phone in on a slow news day when I would say, "Have you ever won a massive house on a competition?"
I'll have to try again when I've had my Weetabix tomorrow for the
do you have Weetabix every day, Ahmed?
I have Weetabix every day, yeah.
0345 6060 973. I mean, Ahmed's asked a nice question. I don't think it has any answers. If I'm wrong, you know what to do. What happens if you win a massive house and you can't afford to keep it? You sell it or you rent it out. Surely. I don't know. Maybe I've missed the point. Eleanor insists it's a brilliant question. Josh is in Worcester. Josh, question or answer?
Oh, you're right, James.
I'm good, Josh. How are you?
I'm all right, thanks.
Nice one.
It's a question.
Yes.
I wanted to know, is there an undisclosed weight limit on a flat? Like, I live on a third floor flat.
Third floor flat?
Yeah, and sometimes I bring I had furniture recently, and I've done a couple of things in the flat, and I'm thinking to myself...
Hang on, what things? What do you mean you've done a couple of things in the flat?
Not like that, but the other day I said to you, producer, I had to vacuum pack a load of clothes.
Okay.
And they were all heavy. I put them all under my bed, and I thought that's a lot of weight just in that box in the bedroom. You've heard stories when people have run a bath and the baths fell through the ceiling.
That you have, yes. But that's more likely because there's been a leak and the wood has rotted.
Well, that's the thing. I just wanted to know.
Is there a limit on... What have you got your eye on?
Well, I've got like a big oak wood record shelf that weighs a ton.
It doesn't weigh a ton, though. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, these things are designed for houses. If you're trying to get a car...
Not flats. Not a flat.
Yeah, but a flat is a house.
No, it's not. No, it's not by definition.
It depends whether are you in a converted house or are you in a block of flats?
No, it's a block of flats, a 3-story block.
You're in the top of it. Yeah, but it's a house in the sense that it's a building with floors. Yeah. And they're all built to the same sort of... I mean, building control will probably... what do you think? There's no way that an item of readily available furniture is going to be too heavy for an average flat.
It doesn't have to be furniture. If I wanted to, I'd do a bit of mechanics. If I could, I'd bring an engine up there.
Yeah, now this is where things get interesting, because you'd be like that fella who worked on a car production line and nicked a car over 20 years because he took a different bit of the car home every night and assembled it in his garage at home. If you were doing that, if you were taking a bit of car up the stairs and then slowly putting a car together, would it reach a point...
Exactly.
I suppose the obvious answer to your question is if it falls through the floor, then you've obviously breached the limit. But you're hoping to avoid that moment of discovery. It's going to be building control, but I don't know what the rules are. A bronze sculpture, Bruce suggests. You might have a really big bronze sculpture or something like that.
Exactly. I just wanted to know if that's a thing.
So is there a limit? Is there a limit on what you can have in your flat?
Yes.
A weight limit in your flat?
Yes.
Whereabouts in Worcester is it? Don't give me your address like the earlier fella did. That can get a bit tricky. Whereabouts in Worcester is it?
Droitwich.
Oh, it's not in Worcester at all.
It is, Worcestershire.
Yeah, Worcestershire. It's not in Worcester.
Well,
it's in Droitwich Spa.
That's exactly where it is.
Well, I just say that. I thought I was going to show off my knowledge of Worcester then. I don't really know Droitwich very well. I know Bromsgrove quite well. It's just up the road. Anyway, let's find out. Josh, what is he allowed in his flat in Droitwich or indeed anywhere else in the world? Kate's in Manchester. Kate, question or answer?
I've got an answer.
Carry on, Kate.
Oh, so exciting. I can't answer anything, but I can answer this.
Go on then.
Hospital gowns.
Oh, yes.
So I'm an operating department practitioner, and I'm the person you see when you get to theatre, the first person in the anaesthetic room.
Oh.
So the patient will come wearing a dressing gown, or they will come on a trolley. So once they come into the anaesthetic room, they'll take the dressing gown off and give that to the ward nurse, who will take back.
Yes.
And then once I've introduced myself, the first thing I will do is ask the patient to sit forward, and I undo the bows on the back of the gown. I need to put ECG dots on the patient. So there's one on the right shoulder, there's one on the left shoulder, and there's one on the left side. So to access that, I can simply lift the gown and pop that on at the back, because I don't want to expose the patient's front to do that.
Perfect.
Another reason is when you go to sleep in an anaesthetic room, you don't have your surgery in there. You get wheeled into theatre, where we then transfer the patient onto the operating table, at which point the gown is pulled completely out from the side so that the patient's back is on the operating table, because you don't want to create pressure areas. So if you've got a knot or something at the back, and often they're put on gel mattresses and things like that to help with pressure areas, and then we expose where the patient's having an operation done, which is literally just pulling the gown up.
That is a pretty comprehensive answer, isn't it?
Well, I'm doing my best. I'm so excited.
That's absolutely. It's brilliant. I don't want to spoil it by saying I kind of worked it out for myself earlier, so I won't say that. No, I won't say that. I said I wasn't going to say that. It's all for you. Yeah. It's a full one-off qualifications. I'm a operating department practitioner.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
I've done a degree in operating department practice. Yes.
Well, I could have worked that out for myself, because now you're a qualified operating department practitioner.
Very qualified. Yes.
Round of applause for Kate, the qualified operating department practitioner.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Love it. I'm now getting sent a list of really heavy things you could have in your house. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm finding it surprisingly interesting. An Arga. An Arga, you're right. But would you have an Arga on an upstairs floor? A gold-plated toilet? A waterbed weighs the same as 10 to 12 people. If a floor can't support that many people or a waterbed, it needs condemning. It's a very good point. 10 years ago, we were worried about the weight of the alcohol our son was storing upstairs in preparation for his wedding. He worked in the bar industry at the time, so the alcohol was important and the wedding was large. It was fine, but we did wonder whether it would have been better stored downstairs, writes Sue in Christchurch. Thank you. 28 after 12 is the time. Andrew's in Grimsby. Andrew, question or answer?
It's another question, James.
Carry on, Andrew.
Okay. Listening to the radio last year, there was an interview with...
The phone line's terrible. Make it snappy.
Okay. There's a lady called Jodie Ounsley, and she became the first deaf female rugby player.
No, you're categorically not making it snappy. What's the question? Quickly, because the phone line's awful.
Can deaf people who lip read detect regional dialect?
There we go. Brilliant question. I think we might have done it, actually. Have we ever done that? Can you do lip reading, not sign language, detect... Must be able to, mustn't you? Lip reading and regional accents. What's the relationship between the two? Thank you. And I'm sorry to have rushed you, Andrew, but it had that horrible little clicky business, and hurrying you up in a rude fashion is infinitely preferable to binning you off entirely and never hearing your lovely voice again. It's coming up to 12:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. We've done the hospital gowns. Chemicals in swimming pools, breakfasts and habits. 1, 2, 3, 4 verses 5, 6, 7, 8. Big houses. Third floor flats. Why does that sound like a tongue twister? Third floor flats. And lip reading regional accents. Any of those and more coming up after the very latest headlines with Amelia Cox.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:32 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Fish tanks getting a lot of action today, which I suspect doesn't make much sense if you've tuned in during the news. But we were looking at whether or not there are weight limits on what you can have in your flat. And thank you to everybody who's reminded me that it was Johnny Cash, One Piece at a Time. It's a beautiful song. I don't know if you've ever heard it. I was talking about... Because Josh asked about the weight limits in flats, and we were speculating on what he could possibly have in his flat that would be too heavy to be supported by the floor of his third floor flat. And, of course, it suggested he might do some mechanics up there. And I remembered the story of the man who stole a car from his employer because he was taking it home one piece at a time. But you're absolutely right. I'd completely forgotten that the story was a song by Johnny Cash called, wait for it, One Piece at a Time. So weightlifting stuff, yeah, you'd have... Anyway, none of these are answers to the question of is there a weight limit. You're just sending me a list of really heavy things, man. It is 12:33, and I think it was Graham who sent me a rather splendid little bit of wordplay about how much you can pack in a flat before the flat packs flat, but I've misremembered it slightly, and I'm not going to be able to find it now. A snooker table would be very heavy, wouldn't it? Proper one with the slate, and I'm doing it. I've just told you off for just sending me a list of heavy things, and now I'm just reading out heavy things. Let's change the subject fast. Sean's in Teddington. Sean, question or answer?
Hi, James. It's a question.
Carry on, Sean.
When the moon landings happened, or when rockets go into space, or the International Space Station, are they armed? Do they carry any weapons just in case they're attacked by aliens? If they were to exist.
Yeah. Well, it's a cost-benefit ratio, isn't it, really? It's a sort of... I'm going to say no.
Right.
But obviously I can't go definitive, given that I don't...
Because when the moon landing happened, they obviously didn't know whether there was going to be anything there or not, did they? So
I think they were fairly confident, Sean.
Well, maybe.
On the. I mean, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure they didn't spend the first sort of 20 minutes looking around corners and... But they couldn't know for sure.
They couldn't know. So they may well have had something aboard. Just like I've always wondered.
Yeah, no, now I'm wondering as well. So I'm oscillating between thinking this is a daft question and thinking it's a brilliant one.
I think it's a brilliant question.
Well, I know you do. You asked it.
Of course, yeah.
So do they have? Are they armed in case of alien attack?
Yeah. At least the first time they went up there.
You'd think, I mean, all the other stories of space exploration, all the fictional space explorations involved weapons. Imagine where Star Trek would have been without, like, phasers.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you're on. I mean, I think if they did, we'd know, don't you?
Well, they've never said they didn't. No,
that's true.
They did, so,
and if they didn't want us to know, then we wouldn't know. And then we won't find out today if they did, because they haven't let us know that they did do.
Very true, yeah.
So that is why I don't think we'll get an answer.
Okay, all right.
Unless we get a definitive no.
Okay.
But let's find out.
Well, then, great, thank you.
No, thank you. Do spaceships have weapons to repel aliens? Brackets, just in case. Close brackets. Rich is in Birmingham. Rich, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Rich.
So it's about the loadings on the floor.
Oh, yes.
So basically, you were right. It is a building control thing. And inside the building regs, we set things that are called uniformly distributed loads.
Oh, yeah.
So you calculate the size of, let's say, a floor joist on the basis of the building regulations and what the size of that joist is and how far they are apart. It kind of depends on whether he's got a concrete floor in his flat, but I would assume that he probably did, in which case, again, engineers will will design that based on reasonable UDLs, so that you would not expect to have a car there. I've designed projects where we have put cars on office floors, and we've had to reinforce the floor underneath specifically to take the weight of a vehicle underneath it.
Gosh.
And that would be abnormal in terms of, what you would expect to put up there. It would normally be in an office, desks and so forth. So, yeah, it's about the building.
A massive safe might have been an issue at some point.
Exactly. These things can go through floors, like bank safes and so forth, but there has to be special attention underneath the floor, so you'd have extra beams and supports underneath really, really heavy objects.
So the builders are governed by regulations, but the resident isn't?
Yeah, I mean, there just comes an expectation that
you won't be a bloody idiot. You won't be a bloody idiot, Rich, is the bottom line here. So that's what the message we're sending to Josh is: don't be an idiot. Don't build a car in your bedroom.
Exactly. I mean, you could have a party in your kitchen where you've got 20 or 30 people in there. The loads of a domestic floor would be designed to cope for massively heavy loads, but not stupidly heavy loads. So there would be a point at which the floor would just collapse you.
I got a message from someone to whom that happened, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to find it now. Wait there a sec. I've worked out how to use the search function after 20 years doing this job. No, I haven't. False alarm. So someone was at a party being held by a famous boxer whose name I hadn't heard before, and the floor collapsed and they all fell through the floor. So, I mean, it can happen, but that was probably going to be more likely to be a building defect or wear and tear, or possibly a leak that has soggened up. Is that the verb? I think is soggened up the wood.
Yeah, that's it. It would have been some sort of defect, but we're governed by tables in the building regulations, basically. So it's a building.
But nothing on the resident, which makes perfect sense actually, because who's going to enforce it?
Well, exactly. You would just be expected not to overload your floor, but things like pianos, even things like pianos in old houses, you have to pick the place where you stick that in the room. You'd be better on the edge than in the middle, because obviously the middle is in the middle of the span, and you get more deflection in the middle of the floor than you do on the outside.
A very, very expert answer to what was a slightly sort of a slightly foolish question, I feel. Thank you, Rich. You've risen to the challenge admirably. What are your qualifications?
I'm an architect, James.
There we go. Yeah. There you go. Round of applause for Rich, please. I like that. 12:39 is the time. Jay's in Streatham. Jay, question or answer?
Hi there, James.
Hello, Jay.
I've got a question for you.
Carry on.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird one. Whenever I go to the pub, I really enjoy drying my hands using one of those commercial, powerful dryers, right?
And you say really enjoy? I
get a very slight kick out of it. More than a towel, right? I like having dry hands, and so I've got a question. Is there a particular reason that commercial hand dryers have never made their way into residential houses? I've never gone to someone's house and they've got a hand dryer, and I'm just curious: is there a particular reason for that?
Well, they're very expensive.
Are they?
Well, they're quite expensive. I know someone who's got one.
No way.
Yeah, you might know him as well. He used to work here, but I don't know if it would be betraying a confidence to reveal that he has one.
See, there's clearly a level of appetite for it from someone.
Yeah, but he's loaded.
So I'm just curious, why are there not more people with it?
This lad's minted, mate. He got a full-on Dyson in his laboratory. It's not Jacob Rees-Mogg, Keith. No, I said it was a mate of mine. Well, so I just think it's quite a big deal to get it all electrified, get it plugged in.
I mean, everybody's got electrics in the house.
In. But you couldn't do it yourself. You couldn't wire in a hand. You couldn't wire in a hand dryer, could you?
No, but you could get a Sparky around to do it for you, couldn't you?
Yeah,
it wouldn't be too much of a hassle.
Adding to the cost. So
Look, man, people spend $1,000, $1,500 on a TV these days, right? Something you use every day. Yeah, exactly.
And the rest. Well, look, I don't know why you're arguing with me, because you're the answer to the question. Why haven't you done it then?
I don't own my house at the moment, so I can't.
Could have done. When you do own your house, what's the first thing you're going to do?
Probably sort the electrics out, and I might make a provision to put a hand dryer in the bathroom.
It's a weird thing to do. I think the reason why you have hand dryers is because the idea of a communal towel is really unpleasant, right?
Yeah.
That's not an issue in your home.
But I would argue that, number one, you want to change your towels. Your towels do get a level of dirt on them. And secondly, a hand dryer is going to get your hand more dry than a towel will, which I, again, get a minor
Depends how
kick
vigorously you towel yourself. Why does everybody think Eddie Mair is the former colleague who has an air blade in his house? It's not Eddie Mair. It's not Eddie Mair. It's someone else. So the answer to your question is people do it. If you then finesse the question into why don't more people do it, then all you're going to really have is they don't want to. Just because you do.
Yeah, I would say that maybe, it's not like you go down B&Q and there's options for buying a hand dryer.
No,
is it?
because there's no market, you see. You're proving my point. There's no market for it. If there was a market for it, it would be on sale in B&Q. Nobody wants one except you and my former colleague.
There is the basis of the question. Why is there no market for it? Is it because of
people
cost?
Don't want one.
Yeah, but why?
Because they don't. It's like saying, why is there no market for cheese-flavoured ice cream? Well, actually, that's a bad example. They can make quite a nice Parmesan ice cream. Why is there no market for sprout-flavoured ice cream? Because people don't want it. You don't say why. Why don't people? There's just nobody wants it.
All right, mate. I think you need to take a breath for a moment.
I'm reading all the messages coming in, and I can't. Oh, okay. The answer.
You all right, mate?
Yeah, I'm all right, mate. I'm good.
Okay.
The answer is people don't want one.
Okay. All right.
I think
that's disappointing.
I know it's disappointing. I'm going to take a round of applause.
All right. Take care.
And hey, when you buy your own place, get back in touch, yeah?
Damn right I will. See you in a bit.
We will see whether or not you have indeed installed an air dryer. An air dryer? Yeah, an air dryer. A hand dryer in your lavatory. Matthew's in Lancaster. Matthew, question or answer?
Answer, James.
Carry on.
It's to do with the carrying, the 5678.
5678?
Exactly. I'm afraid you were wrong with your answer. It's not to do with coming in at different times.
Oh, go on.
Yeah, it's to do with how musicians and dancers divide their... Well, musicians divide the bar up into crotchets, which is what they're counting, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
And then dancers are dividing... They tend to dance in groups of 8, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But that's a bit too much to say, so they just say 5, 6, 7, 8 instead. It's to do with the movement on every beat.
It's when you reset, as it were. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how you play music. But when you're dancing, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Exactly. So if a musician was playing in 3, 4, they would go 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, and that means then you know when to come in.
I love it. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Qualifications?
I got a degree in jazz, in music.
Oh, that's nice. What, just jazz? You specialised in jazz?
Just jazz. I don't use it anymore very much in my new job, but just jazz. It was fantastic.
That's sensational. All right, you're on. Round of applause, please.
Thank you.
No, thank you. I can't tell you who it is that has got a hand dryer in their bathroom at home, or used to. It's been a while, but I can give you some clues. And I think he works on another radio station at the moment. So there you go. That is why, A, it would be betraying a confidence, and B, I think he works on another radio station at the moment. So I'll leave it there. There you go. That's all the clues you're getting. It's 12:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:48 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where Mystery Hour continues. Swimming pools, breakfasts, done that one. Big houses, third floor, done that one. Lip reading and regional accents. Spaceships and guns. And I think we've done hand dryers, but there might be room for improvement. Libby is in Nantwich. Libby, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry on, Libby.
It's the one about lip reading and regional accents.
Oh, yes.
I'm deaf. I've been deaf since I was a toddler. Lost quite a significant chunk of my hearing, and taught myself to lip read, and I can categorically state that yes, we can lip read regional accents.
And identify them?
Yes. If I'm watching the TV, I tend to watch TV with the sound down and subtitles on.
Yes.
And I can usually spot if it's somebody with a Scottish accent or a Welsh accent. I don't know how I do it, but I can, yeah.
It's because of the shape of their mouths.
Yeah, it is, essentially. They do sort of form words differently, but yeah, I haven't really extended it to any other regional accent, possibly northeastern.
You could do a Scouser, couldn't you? Because their mouth falls like this all the time. It really was smiling. How do you know that you're right? I forgive the insensitivity of the question, but how do you mark your homework on this one?
Usually turn the volume up and think, it looks like that person's Scottish, and might turn the volume up and then, confirm it.
Yeah, I probably could have worked that out. But I didn't know how deaf you were. Because you've got enough hearing then to actually crank the volume right up and say, oh, yep, he's Scottish.
Yeah.
There's been a murder. There's been a murder, he said. That'll be Taggart. I love that. And you've told us your qualifications. Have a round of applause on me.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Libby. I like that one a lot. It is 12:49. Louise is in Letterston. Louise, question or answer?
It's an answer, James.
Carry
nice
on,
to speak to you.
No, likewise. What have you got?
The hand dryer. My husband purchased one, and we had it in our downstairs bathroom. We had a chrome one, which was rather nice.
Yes.
But what happened was he purchased it from eBay.
Right.
And the eBay notification said, for sale, one unused chrome hand dryer. We bought it I bought it for my bathroom, thought it would look swish.
Yeah.
Showed my girlfriend, and she said, you just as well get a condom machine to go with it.
Yes, I like your girlfriend. I mean, because it is a little bit pub toilet, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what this chap said. So my husband bought it for £100. We didn't have a window in the downstairs toilet, so there was no towels to go down. So we left it when we moved. It was in Cardiff.
So I mean, in many ways, you've answered the question. If you really want one, you can get one.
You can get one on eBay cheap. Second hand if you hold, not second hand, brand new if you're prepared to hold out for it.
I'm getting sent all sorts of links now to brand new ones as well. Have you ever heard of this, Louise? Listen to this from Trish. She says, we've got a body dryer in our bathroom. It's 5 foot tall and pushes out warm air to dry you all over.
Well, wow.
I've never heard of that.
It'd be nice to have a bathroom that size and to be able to afford to run one.
Well, how much did it cost to run the... I'm looking it up as well. She gave me the brand name. Yeah, look at that.
It was minimal. It was minimal.
Well,
it was very, very easy.
Wasn't a problem.
My husband installed it himself. He's good at that.
I see. But you left it when you moved. You left it when you moved, so you weren't that smitten.
I was devastated.
No, you weren't.
I wanted to take it.
You could have taken it.
I did.
You could have taken
it.
Hey,
listen, we were on Couples Come Dine With Me, and it was a big feature when two gay chaps tried to go in there and play with it.
Did you win?
We did, of course.
There you go. Rock and roll. So people listening will know now. It's not a show I've watched a lot, so I've missed that episode.
No,
but people listening now will recognise you and go, it's her with the hand dryer. It's her with the hand dryer, they're saying. It's her with the hand dryer.
Oh, it's lovely to speak to you, James.
No, I'm giving you a round of applause whether you want one or not. There you go. You can put it in.
Thank you very much.
You can put it in the downstairs loo with your certificate from Couples Come Dine With Me. Thank you. Peter's in Redbridge. Peter, question or answer?
It's an answer about the space.
About the spaceships.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Okay. I'm a little bit of a space history nerd.
Okay.
On Apollo 11, they had a machete because it was part of a survival kit, because as part of their training, they went to various places on the planet to learn how to survive in jungles, barren places on Earth.
Oh, yeah.
They trained on Earth, but obviously they weren't sure exactly what they were going to find on the moon, so they actually had a survival kit on Apollo 11, which included a machete, which obviously can be used as a weapon. Not so sure about modern...
You wouldn't. I mean, if you were up against an alien mind meld, I'm not sure a machete would be much use to you, is it? In the great...
Well, yeah, but it is still classed as a weapon.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great answer. I'm going to trust you on it, but it's not. I don't know quite that it's what Sean was looking for.
No, I think he's thinking of Space Force, because obviously Space Force is a military arm.
Someone told me
logically,
that cosmonauts used to carry a pistol.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff I read up on, a lot of the weapons they carried were. How could I put this? If something happened, it was a quick death.
That's what I mean. Yeah, so it would be a way of dispatching someone in case of emergency.
Yeah, exactly.
But not to shoot aliens.
It wasn't to shoot aliens. It was more of a.
But then if an alien
I've got no hope. But I've got no. I mean, if you think about it, the original Apollo astronauts, they were on the moon. They had one engine to get them off the moon. If that engine failed, it's a slow death or a quick death.
Yeah. It's like that Sandra Bullock film, although spoiler alert. But you wouldn't want to just, because do you know what else is true, Peter?
Go.
In space, no one can hear you scream.
and same as in the vacuum.
It's very true. So I'm going to give you a round of applause, but we don't know for certain that no astronauts, cosmonauts.
Unfortunately, because of the secrecy, they will never tell you for certain. But they did allow you to know that they had machetes for survival.
Well, Mark points out in a text that a machete would actually be quite handy against the clangers. A round of applause for Peter, please. Mark makes a valid point. You just wouldn't know, would you? It's all gone a bit. Is it Rosewall? Is it Rosewell? Rosewell, isn't it? Well, if they did exist, they wouldn't tell us anyway. So you can't prove that they don't. Barry's in Southend. Barry, question or answer?
It's an answer. Did you mean Roswell?
Yeah. What did I say?
Roswell.
Oh yeah. Well done. Carry on.
It's an answer to the P question in the swimming pools.
Wee, please.
Wee.
Yeah.
It's an urban legend, unfortunately, designed by parents 70 years ago.
Really?
Yeah, there's no chemical which can actually do that. Plus, if you did design a chemical, the chlorine in the swimming pool would kill it straight away. You'd also have false negatives for things like sweat, body lotions, and a lot of swimming pools contain a lot of urine anyway, so it would change the colour of the water as well. The amount of chemical, if it was around, you'd need to use in the swimming pool would be a ridiculous amount, and you'd need to use pH neutralisers every day to counteract it.
So it wouldn't be worth the effort.
It's not. It's just an urban legend people use to stop children weeing in the swimming pool.
It's an extremely effective one.
It is. It works very well. I get asked this question so many times from schools and councils, and we said, sorry, it doesn't exist.
Well, you are nudging us ever closer towards the next question, which is, what are your qualifications?
Oh, I've been in the cleaning and janitorial professional industry for over 25 years.
So you like supplying chemicals and stuff like that?
Yeah, everything to schools, councils, everything. Even
so they want to know. So I mean, there aren't many pools in schools anymore. But if there is, they'd love to get hold of this chemical if it existed. And you have the sorry job of telling them it doesn't exist.
It doesn't. And then they see a film. They say, "Well, we've seen it in the movie," and so that's just food dye. They're doing it for effect.
Yeah. And so, it's such an effective urban myth that it's actually been replicated falsely in films, because that's probably where people get the idea that it's real from.
Adam Sandler, Grown Ups, 2010.
Yeah, there it goes. Oh, this is just a legendary call. Have a round of applause on me.
Cheers, have a great day.
No, you too. Walker's in Nelson. Walker, question or answer?
Hello, James. Welcome back. It's an answer, please.
Carry on, Walker.
To the house competitions.
Oh, this was Ahmed's question. What happens if you win a really big house but you can't really afford it?
Well, I buy an entry every month for one.
Oh, yes.
And they offer an extra cash prize on top if you win the house.
So in order to, well, I mean, if you need it to run the house, you can run the house for as long as it takes before you want to sell the house. You're not going to be left with this enormous, expensive white elephant dangling around your neck.
No, and as you say, it takes time to sell a house. And the current one, they're offering £250,000 on top of the house
itself. I can't ask you any more questions because I would worry that you might lure me into Ofcom regulated territory where it sounds like I'm promoting the competition. But I can wish you luck, Walker. I hope your numbers come up this week.
Well, I just want a big house to let out for disadvantaged children to have holidays in.
Oh, lovely idea. That's what Michael Morpurgo does, or did, certainly when he was younger.
I'd have to sort of rent it out to film locations the rest of the year.
You've given this a lot of thought.
To pay for itself.
You've given it. Well, what are you going to do with all the little urchins when you're renting it out for film locations?
Oh, no, well, they the films do it through the winter and the little urchins go in the summer.
Oh, that's a lovely little business model you've got there. This is why.
The chances of winning are very, very, very remote. But,
you can say that again. But you never know, eh? You've got to be in it to win it.
The profits go to charities, so
good.
Somebody's benefiting.
Have a round of applause on me and my very best wishes.
Thank you. Not on Ray Liotta.
No, don't be ridiculous. You didn't win one, did you? Even if you'd won one, you wouldn't necessarily have got a Ray Liotta. Outrageous behaviour. I You can have a board game though, Walker. There you go. Because I got to pick a favourite. That was lovely. And then of course, if you win the house and all the children come to stay, or the little urchins come to stay in the summer, then they can play the Mystery Hour board game one evening. That'd be nice. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts, including James O'Brien Daily, the best bits of this show in a 60-minute package every single day. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Tom Swarbrick will be with you at 4 on LBC, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
Hello, nice to have you back.
It's nice to be back.
We can talk later about the thing that we won't talk about on the radio.
I didn't get a case.
Oh, come on.
8 days.
What did you do? Just read and read and read?
Read a lot of books, did a lot of crosswords, made a lot of friends, signed a lot of books.
Oh, really?
By day 3, people were bringing books in to be signed, which I was rather pleased about.
Oh, God. Did you open a stall and sell lemonade?
I was tempted.
James O'Brien on LBC.